seconds to say something before I mute everybody.
Hello. Okay, goodbye.
Good evening.
So I'll say some of you guys are getting the hang of it. Some of you guys are like, But good to see everybody. Good to see the smiling faces. I need some smiling faces today. Yesterday was kind of a heavy day, so it's good to see everybody. All right, well, it's 7:01. I'm going to go ahead and mute us, jump right into it so that we can get out of here hopefully a little bit early. But good to see everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and mute as soon as I find it. Folks still coming in, so hang on a second. There we go. Okay, this is a Real Investors event. Would you please join me in a prayer? Dear Lord, we thank you so much for your wonderful hand upon us. We just continue to ask that you have your hands upon this nation, upon its leadership, that you continue to have your hands upon all of us who are involved at Real Investors and are responsible for helping other investors. And we ask that you continue to have your hand on us individually and to guide our steps in all our ways. May we acknowledge you in Jesus' name. Amen. So no homework tonight. Let's just jump right into the main thing and make the main thing the main thing. Your homework for yesterday was to download a copy of the US Constitution and read it. And many of you guys did, and I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it. Boy, you still got folks coming in. So let me let them in, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get put that there so I can see it, and put this here so I can see people coming in. And if you guys can see my screen okay, can you give me a quick thumbs up? Thumbs up, thumbs up. Yep. And it should say 21 days to real estate riches, new, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, great. All right. So real quick, again, a recap. We are here. Oh my gosh, look, we're tearing this thing up. Today, we're talking about getting ourselves set up for success, or as I like to call it, going in motion. I am not going to go through homework today on the Facebook page. Many of you guys are posting on the Facebook page and the Facebook group. Greatly appreciate it. Our group is now up to, that's an old picture, we're now up to about 90 some folks. So good to see that everybody's in now. And I will continue to comment and critique. If you want to upload homework, if you want to upload old homework, do me a favor and just find the day where the assignment was due, and just post it there, because anytime you post anywhere on the site, I get an announcement. And if I have blocked out time to go read, I'll go read. If I have not blocked out time, I'll go back and read when I have blocked out time. But don't just post your homework assignments randomly. We got 90 folks going through this now, and if you just post it in there randomly, it's just gonna become a train wreck. So diligently look for the day that the homework was due, even if you're a couple of days behind, and post it in the day that it was due. Again, even if you were behind, I will still see it, I will still critique it, I will still comment on it, okay? And your homework assignments, I kind of gave you guys a little break yesterday. I'm gonna give you a little break tomorrow, but you are gonna have a pretty intense homework assignment today. And now is the point where we really are sort of rolling up our sleeves and getting to work. And I promised you that I was going to show you step by step everything you needed to do to get your first deal done in as little as 21 days. And that's exactly what we're doing. And tonight's the night we start running. So if you kind of felt like, hey, we've sort of been jogging at a sort of medium pace, you're right. If some of you are feeling like, gosh, Sherman, why can't you go a little bit faster? You're correct. But I just wanted to make sure that we had a firm foundation during the first 6-7 days, because we're going to start hustling starting next week. In fact, actually starting tonight. So with that, real quickly, this is where we are. We are now completing week 1. I hope you guys have enjoyed week 1. If you have, give me a thumbs up. If it's been good, if you learned a couple things, cool. Cool, because that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to take you from wherever you are to into the promised land. And for most of us, that means, you know, coming out of our comfort zone a little bit and learning some new stuff. Or, as the case might be, past 2 days, relearning some stuff that you didn't really understand or really didn't realize, or maybe somebody said it to you incorrectly or said it to you wrong, and having somebody go, hey, wait a minute, whatever it is that somebody told you, that's not right. Let me tell you what's right. So today we're now coming to the end of our first week together. This is where we start to go in motion. Before your head hits the pillow tonight, you will be forming an entity and you'll be registering a domain name and you'll be setting yourself up for business. If you've done it already, then this is probably kind of a review. Pay attention to what I'm saying, because maybe there's some things you may have done in the past that wasn't quite right, and here's a great way to fix it. And if you've never set up your own entity, well, tonight's the night you do it. If you've never set up a domain name or built a website, well, tonight's the night we take that first step towards it, because we need to go in motion. We need to set ourselves up to go in business, because all next week I'm going to be talking about running your business, and then the following week I'm going to be talking about automating your business. So tonight's the night we're talking about getting the business out of your head, off the ground, and actually getting some stuff done. Quick recap, and I mean quick recap. Talked about the fact that there's 13 fundamental ways to make $100,000 or more a year, 6 figures. Talked about the concept of approaching it like it's a ladder, going through those 5 phases: quick cash, chunks of cash, cash flow, wealth acceleration, like legacy wealth. And talked about the best place to start in this business is as bird dogging and wholesaling. And I spent a fair amount of time yesterday explaining the differences between each, and also talking about where I thought was the best place for you to start. Did you guys get a lot out of yesterday's session? If you did, give me a thumbs up, please. Thumbs up, thumbs up. You can also do it in the chat. You can even type the words thumbs up. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. It's good to know that you guys are getting something out of it. Okay. So again, this comes straight out of my book, Real Estate Investing 101. This is a recap. I've already talked about it on prior days. If for some reason you're looking at this chart and you're going, what the heck is he talking about? Go back 2 days prior and walk yourself through again. Because maybe you were there, but you weren't quite there because you had some distractions, or maybe you skipped a couple of days, which I strongly recommend you don't do, because every day builds on the prior day. Or maybe you were there and you were into it, but it just didn't make sense. Go back and review it again. Okay, we talked about the fact that Real Investors exists to help you along your journey. We talked about the different levels that we have within Real Investors and the different coaches and mentors that we have within Real Investors. And at some point when we finish up this 21-day course, if you want to go on to another strategy, another one of those 13 strategies, we'll have that conversation before the 21 days is over. And I'll also recommend who I think might be best to help you implement those strategies. But for now, and for today, and for, I guess, what, the next 14 days or 15 days, excuse me, we need to focus on getting yourself set up to do business. Because I can tell you this, if I send you over to Stephanie Terry, or I pick up the phone, call Stephanie Terry and say, hey, look, I got a new coaching student and they really want to get into rehabbing, and I send you to Stephanie, and the first thing Stephanie says, well, what's the name of your LLC? And you go, what's that? What's the name of your company? What's that? Where's your website? What's that? Stephanie's going to put you right back to me. This is all about getting yourself set up to do business the right way, get that first deal under your belt, get that second, third deal under your belt, and then put that on autopilot so you can go on to other things. But if you don't have that firm foundation, your house is not going to stand. The first part of building any real estate project is getting the foundation right. You mess with the foundation and your building could wind up looking like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, a building that's never been occupied in the history of the building because it started to lean before they even finished it. You've got to get the foundation right. That's what this 21-day course is all about, getting a foundation set up to do business by actually doing the real estate business and learning as we go along, okay? All right, so today we're talking about going in motion, and a big part of what I'm going to be talking about comes out of our training course on asset protection. Is this an asset protection course? No, this is a course on getting your first deal done in 21 days or less. But asset protection and the very first part of asset protection, or what I would call asset protection 101, is a part of it. Because you cannot, well, you can do anything you want to do. You should not, in my opinion, be out there doing business unless you've taken at least a very first basic level of asset protection. So today we're going to be talking about 3 topics. If you are prepared to take notes, I strongly recommend you start taking them now, okay? So going in motion, we're going to actually get a business set up today. We're going to get our domain name registered today. We're going to take the first step towards setting up our website today so that we can start doing business next week. when we start rolling out the strategy for getting that first deal done. And the first thing we need to understand is how should we do business? And so I'm calling today's session Going in Motion, and we have 3 topics we will discuss before I give you your homework assignment. Number 1, we're going to talk about clone versus no clone. And you'll understand that in a second when I get to the appropriate slide. We're going to talk about trusts versus entities. And we're going to talk about how you set up your clone entity. So I think you're already probably seeing which way I'm leaning. So first thing, to clone or not to clone. And the reason why I picked that title is because I remember during my contracts class, and anybody remember what grade I got in my contracts class when I was in law school? Anybody remember? What did Sherman get in his contracts class? What did he get? Put it in the chat box. That's right, he got an A. I got an A in my contracts class. I got a B+ in my constitutional law. But one of the things that we covered in contracts was this concept of cloning versus not cloning, setting up entities. Now, truth be told, before I graduated, I did take an advanced asset protection, otherwise known, but they don't call it asset protection in law school. They call it, oh my gosh, I'm having a senior moment. I know what they call it, I just can't remember it for a split second. What is that? Estate planning, sorry. In law school and in law firms, they don't call it asset protection. That's a more common generic term. In law firms and in law school, they call it, I just said it, now I forgot it again. Golly, somebody help me, please. Maybe need more water, must be dehydrated. It's called estate planning. Thank you, Tari. Estate planning. And so when you go see a lawyer at a law firm, you're like, hey, I want you to do an asset protection plan for me. They're probably gonna scratch their head and say, do you mean estate planning? Because estate planning is all about how you get your affairs in order to make sure that the tax man doesn't grab it, and also make sure that lawsuits don't grab it. So estate planning is a very niched part of the legal profession. And because it's niche, guess how much you pay lawyers on an hourly basis to do estate planning? You got that right, buku bucks. Average contracts lawyer charges between, in the DC area or Baltimore area, because I find that you can get just as good a talent in Baltimore and pay half the price. But in most places outside of Washington, DC, the average, and New York, the average contract lawyer is probably $250 to $500 an hour. Your average estate planning lawyer, oh my gosh, that generally starts around $800 an hour because it's such a specialized niche. And very few people actually need real bona fide estate planning. You know, somebody who's got millions of dollars in assets, and they want to protect it for various reasons. First, they want to shield it and protect it from lawsuits. Then they want to shield it and protect it from partners. That's the number one place where litigation happens, is when two partners have a falling out. Then they want to protect it from the tax man. Maybe they want to protect it from a daughter-in-law or a son-in-law who comes into the life of one of their children or grandchildren, only to quote unquote get a piece of the family jewels or a piece of the family estate, and has nefarious intent from the outset. Oh, there he goes. Sherman's using the big lawyer words again. So it is, again, and you heard me say this the other day in one of the videos, it is not uncommon for a first generation to create wealth and a second generation to blow wealth and a third generation to blow it all and start from ground zero. That's not uncommon. In fact, it's the rare instance where the first generation does something and then the second generation comes along and makes it even better. Case in point would be like Marriott. Marriott originally started off J.W. Willard Marriott, and he became a multimillionaire doing restaurants. And then his son, Bill Marriott, Willard Marriott Jr., but AKA Bill, decided to take the family into the hotel business. And his father was adamantly opposed to going into the hotel business. And in fact, one of the things that he was really upset about when they went to the hotel business was the fact that they had bars in the hotels because the Marriotts are devout Mormons. And it really was Bill Marriott who really sort of convinced his dad, no, this is the direction we need to go. And he took a company that was doing, several million and turned it into $1 billion enterprise. And I think now there's a third generation Marriott at the helm, but it really was Bill Marriott, the son of JW, who really quadrupled, more than, quite frankly, the size of the Marriott Corporation and the Marriott Enterprises by moving them strategically in a new direction. That's rare. Normally what happens is somebody works their whole life, hands it over to the kids. Next thing you know, the kids marry somebody and the estate gets cut in half during the divorce settlement, blah, 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 blah. So estate planning is all about thinking not just about what I've done, what I've created, what I've protected, but also how do we pass wealth on to the succeeding generations. Asset protection is a subset of estate planning. And today, I'm not going to go through a full-blown asset protection because we actually have a training, a course, a training on asset protection. And I'll be more than happy to tell you about it later. You don't need to get bogged down in assets. Like if you ain't got, as my friend Ibarra says, if you ain't got no assets, you don't need no asset protection, right? So we got to get it first. But there are some important pieces and components of asset protection that we want to deploy day one, because there are some things that can come back and bite us in the butt if we're not careful. The first one being, should you be out there operating without a shield? Should you be out there operating without armor? And I know lots of people have lots of different opinions about business, and I would not go so far as some of my friends have gone to say, you know, business is war. But there are times in business you're going to feel like you're in the trenches, you're on the battlefield. And you don't want to be out there on the battlefield unprotected. You don't want to be on the battlefield without your armor. Even better yet, what if, just put your pens down and just go with me for a second. What if you could clone yourself? And instead of you getting up and going to work every day, your clone gets up and goes to work every day. What if instead of you getting out there, driving in the car, fighting rush hour, your clone got out there and fought traffic in rush hour? And what if you were in a high occupation job where you've got a higher than average possibility of being injured or worse? What if you could clone yourself and let your clone go do that job, go do that dangerous job? Maybe you're in a construction profession and somebody's got to get up on the roof and inspect the roof. And if you got to get up and inspect the roof, it's like rain, snow, shine. But you know how dangerous it is getting up on a roof when it's raining or it's slick or there's frost out there. And like, I'm not getting up on that ladder. Hey, clone, get up there. And your clone knows everything you know. Your clone behaves exactly the same way that you behave. But if the clone slips and falls off the roof and breaks a leg, you know, you feel bad for the clone, but you know, you just keep on moving on. Or if the clone falls off the roof and worse, you feel bad for the clone, but you're still amongst the living. Anybody kind of, you know, like that idea without the weird overtones of like, if I find me, you know, in my car, I'm like, what are you doing? That's my car. Don't you dare touch the music. So here's the deal. As it was explained to me when I was going through law school, the whole purpose of setting up entities is to legally clone yourself so that if you do something out there in business that is fatal, you terminate the clone, but you still survive. And when you think about entities in that manner, that these are living, breathing entities, and think about it in terms of them being clones and clones of yourself for specific business/legal purposes, it's a whole lot easier to understand both the lesson for today and also as you go forward in business. An entity is basically a clone of you, a clone of yourself, for the purpose of doing business. Entities are created at the state level. And as far as the state is concerned, that entity is a living, breathing organism. And if the entity does something horrific or stupid, It's the entity that takes the hit, not you personally. That's a very different attitude than you're going to find in other parts of the world. As an example, and you can Google this, but don't do it now. There have been a number of stories in the news over the years about CEOs of corporations in China doing really bad things. Well, guess what? CEOs around the world sometimes do really bad things. That's not to justify it. I'm just simply saying China is no different than the United States. It's no different than Russia. It's no different than Nigeria. It's no different than the UK. There are unscrupulous people as well as being scrupulous people. And sometimes a CEO makes a bad call, like the CEO of Union Carbide, who made a bad call that resulted in the Bhopal incident that killed millions of people when toxic gas escaped. In China, if you are the CEO, president, person in charge of a company, and your company does something wrong, they take you out back and shoot you in the head. You say, Sherman, you're being dramatic. Okay, write that down and go Google it after class today and prove me wrong and put it in the Facebook group. I'm not kidding. There have been a number of incidents over the years where CEOs have been negligent, CEOs have done bad things, or companies have done bad things, and the CEOs themselves had to pay the ultimate price as though the business and they were one. And yet, if you look at the history of the United States, there has also been CEOs who've done some really questionable or nefarious things, but never, ever, ever in the United States have we ever seen a CEO paying the price for something the company did. Now, granted, there's guys like Bernie Ebbers who wound up going to jail because it was proven that he was bilking the company, but that's what Bernie did as the CEO himself. I'm talking about when a company does something wrong, a company does something bad, a company releases toxic gas and poisons people, a company fails to properly service their aircraft and the planes fall out of the sky, a company puts together a mixture that they know is not correct or doesn't do an inspection, et cetera, and as a result of the actions of the company, somebody dies, somebody's injured, something bad happens. And in many cases, most cases, and if you guys find an exception, again, post it in the Facebook group and prove me wrong, and I'll change how I lecture and what I say. But in pretty much every case when something like that happens, the CEOs and the presidents and the vice presidents and the treasurer go scot-free, and the company has to pay a fine. Like, what is that? How can that possibly be? Simple. In the United States of America, and Mitt Romney got this right, even though nobody agreed with him, except people who knew he was right. In the United States of America, companies are people. Wait a minute, whoa, dude. Are you talking about some sci-fi movie? Are you talking about iRobot? No. In the United States of America, when you create an entity, in the eyes of the state where you created that entity is a living, breathing organism. It is distinct and separate from you. It is just like you have, quote unquote, cloned yourself. Not with the sort of ethical dilemmas that you have in terms of doing human cloning, but from a business perspective, a legal perspective, when you set up an entity, that entity fundamentally is a clone of your knowledge of how to do business. That entity is a clone of you in terms of how it operates and how it does. But in the eyes of the government, your clone, the business, is totally different and distinct from you. And if the business does something wrong, you are not typically held liable. Unless, of course, what you do is so nefarious, so out there. In fact, there's a legal term. I'll say it, you can write it down. You don't have to look it up. But there's a legal term called res ipsa loquitur. I think it's res ipsa loquitur. All right. And the term, or in the Latin term, means the thing is so bad, it speaks for itself. Okay. Res ipsa loquitur. But fundamentally, if you're just doing business and you set up an entity and you make a mistake or you do something wrong, It's the entity that takes the hit. And if what you do is so bad, so wrong, you can put the entity out of business and start anew. Now, what gives us this power to be able to do something like that? I mean, because that's kind of crazy sounding, isn't it? Like, I can create an entity, the entity can go do business. If the entity gets in trouble, I can put the entity out of business, but it doesn't impact me personally. Where in the world would somebody even come up with that idea? Much less be able to see it happen over and over and over and over and over again in the United States of America. Who did that? Who did? Come on, somebody tell me. Put it in the chat box. Who did that? Who came up with that? Well, if you did your homework assignment last night, you know exactly who did that. It's in the Constitution. The ability to create an entity, form a business gets in trouble, and you can put it in bankruptcy and start over again. It's in the Constitution. I told you guys, there's stuff in there that impacts our daily lives that the average American has no clue. That Constitution, that document, has got so many goodies in it, things that we just take for granted. And it's bizarre that some people go to foreign countries and expect those foreign countries to behave like the United States, and then realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm not in Kansas anymore. I'm not in the US anymore. I can't just do something through my company and walk away scot-free. Case in point, CEO of, I think it's a joint venture between Renault and maybe Toyota. I may be getting that wrong. But bottom line is, he was doing business in Tokyo, in Japan, and they wanted to arrest him because of something that the company did. So he's from Belgium, I think, and in the middle of the night, they got him on an airplane and snuck him out of the country because the Japanese government was ready to arrest him because of something the company did. What we have here in the United States of America is really, 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 really special. You hear story after story about somebody who was bankrupt in a foreign country and then they come to the US and start over. Next thing you know, they're a billionaire. Not uncommon. Because the rules of how we play the game in business and in life are different than anywhere else in the world. And that's because of that Constitution. So back to the business at hand, going in motion, creating an entity, creating a clone. Think of creating entities as though you were cloning yourself, so that if something goes wrong, you don't take the hit, your clone does. And if that kind of sort of makes sense, can you give me a thumbs up, please? Either on the screen or in the chat box. Give me a thumbs up. As we go along, this will become more readily apparent. But I want to first get that out there. So the first question we got to ask ourselves is, should we clone or not clone? Well, let me ask you something. If you knew that you were traveling to a foreign country, and that foreign country had a history of people getting shot at, kidnapped, beat up. Oh my God, it sounds like Washington, D.C. Uh-oh, don't tell me I said that. Muriel Bowser is a good friend of mine, so please. If you were going to a foreign country and you kind of like, I really don't want to go, but your job is making you go. And when you arrive, the person in charge says, listen, you're only going to be here for a week. I strongly suggest you put on this armored jacket. I strongly suggest that you carry this radio with you. And I know it's kind of crazy, but if you hear the air raid siren, put this helmet on. Do you think it's kind of a good idea to take the body armor and the radio and the helmet if you're traveling someplace you've never been before that kind of has a history of maybe some violence and violent outbreaks? Yes? Anybody here agree with that? Thumbs up? Yeah. Okay. So you're going into business. You're going into battle. You're going some places that you've never been before, and there is a very real possibility that you might get into a dogfight, and you kind of want to have yourself protected. You may want to have some body armor. You may want to have a helmet. You may want to have some kind of a weapon to defend yourself. Look, even Jesus said what? Sell your cloak and get a sword. I'm pretty sure it's in there, even though I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure he said words to that effect. Sell your cloak and buy a sword. So you're going into battle. And maybe it's just a light skirmish. or maybe it's full out dogfight, hand-to-hand combat. But bottom line is, if you're going into business, you are going into battle. And the smartest thing you can do is get yourself some armor. And even better yet, if you have the opportunity to clone yourself, and there's no ethical dilemma, get yourself a couple of clones and let the clones go in front. I strongly suggest you go ahead and get yourself a couple of clones. And that's what forming an entity really fundamentally is all about. When you go in business, you have a choice. You can either operate and start doing business without a trust or without an entity, in which case you are operating in a position what's known as a sole proprietor. How many people in here have ever heard the term sole proprietor? Sole proprietor. If you've heard sole proprietor, say yes, I've heard of sole proprietor, or I've heard SP, sole proprietor. All right. Sole proprietorship, or being a sole proprietor, is when you consciously decide to go into business without incorporating or forming an LLC or forming a trust. In other words, you have consciously decided to move to Lebanon, go outside tomorrow to go to Starbucks, and not wear your body armor. You've made a conscious decision that, you know what, it's just a little too heavy, and I don't want to be looking foolish having that helmet on my head, even though 90% of the people, and when the siren goes off, and the IEDs start blowing up, and the bombs start falling out of the sky, you have no protection whatsoever. And if you step on something and blow yourself up, you stepped on something and you blew yourself up. And you'll sit there going, why didn't I go ahead and use that clone and have my clone go to Starbucks while I was sitting in the hotel room? I could have done that. Why didn't I wear the body armor? Why didn't I get into the armored vehicle? And the time to think about that stuff is not after something's blown up or blown off. But when you operate in business as a sole proprietor, you're operating by yourself, for yourself, with no armor, no protection, and no clone. The very decision to operate in business, take the first step in business. I mean, I'm talking about registering a domain name and printing up some business cards and telling people that you are out there doing business. If you do that without forming an entity first, you have no protection, you have no armor, you're operating as though you decided you don't want to clone. And if hell and high water come and something blows up, I'm just going to have to lay on top of the hand grenade and take my chances. That's what it means to operate as a sole proprietor. And I know some people are like, well, gee, Sherman, I don't have the money to form an entity, so I'm just going to go out here and do a couple of deals, and then I'll take the money I earn to go for my entity. That's the wrong attitude. That's like saying, well, gee, I know my body armor is coming in an hour, but I really want to go to Starbucks now. I'll take my chances. Well, that could be the very hour where the IED decides to go off and you're not protected. I've seen people do things in business, then form an entity, but because they did something before they formed their entity, they get no protection from the entity. And they're at the mercy of the court because they decided to do business as a sole proprietor. In my opinion, you should never, ever, ever do business as a sole proprietor, not for a day, not for an hour, not for a minute, not for a second. The first step towards creating a business and using the business to create the lifestyle you desire is to form some kind of entity. To create a clone, somebody who will take the hit for you, especially in the early days when you are most likely to make mistakes. And what we're going to do today is form entities. And I don't want to hear anybody tomorrow, next week, 3 weeks from now going, well, the reason why I didn't form my entity is because I couldn't afford blah, 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 blah. That's like the negligent parent who says, well, the reason why I don't have a car seat, and I knew there was a possibility that we might get hit in a car accident, But I never in my wildest dream did I think we're going to get broadsided by a truck, and never did I think that my daughter was going to be thrown out the window and be permanently brain damaged for the rest of her life. And if only I'd had a couple of bucks, I probably could have got that car seat and put her in a car seat as opposed to just putting her in the back of the car. It only takes once, guys. Now, it may seem a little dramatic, but I'm gonna tell you a story. And you can call it dramatic if you want, but I told you guys from the outset, I'm in the aviation business, have been in the aviation business most of my adult life. And when you're in the aviation business servicing private aircraft, having employees service private aircraft, you have some pretty intense training. You don't want anything to happen to the aircraft. You don't want anything to happen to the people who are in that aircraft, especially at 30,000 feet. And you sure enough don't want anything to happen to your employees. But we had one employee, we're going back probably 15 years ago now, who went through the training, went through the training, went through the training, went through the training. And we're like, do not ever do these things. And his first day after his 2 weeks of training, first day on the line, first day, was servicing a propeller aircraft. I think it was a Hawk, not a Hawker. I can't remember what it was, a Beechcraft. And he walked into the propeller, because when the propeller is spinning, you don't see it, which is why we stress in the training, don't ever do this. And his first day after 2 weeks of training, he walked into a propeller. Yes, it was a closed casket. Now you can say, Sherman, you're just being dramatic, but I'm telling you guys, there are certain things that when your teacher, your mentor, your coach says, please don't do this, we're not saying it just to hear ourselves talk. We're saying it because we've seen the repercussions of what happens when you don't do certain things. Granted, that's aviation. We're not talking about aviation. We're not talking about servicing private jets. We're not talking about servicing private planes. But we are talking about you setting up a business, going in business, and doing business, not playing business. This ain't no dang boot camp. You didn't pay me to sit in some hotel room for 3 days and give you a brain dump on how I make money. You're here because you want to do deals. You want to make money. You want to get that first deal done. And in order to do that properly, you're going to have to go in motion, go in business. And you dare not go in business as a sole proprietor, not 1 minute, not 1 second, not 1 nanosecond, never. Because the repercussions of doing business as a sole proprietor when you don't know what you're doing are too great. So find the darn money necessary to set up an entity. And if you can't find the couple $100 necessary to do that, then go back to your day job and forget about real estate. You don't do business as a sole proprietor. Is everybody understanding how important this is? If you are, give me a thumbs up. You're like, Sherman, going crazy. I'm telling you, I've seen what happens to people who just want to sort of like do this on the down low, and it comes back and it bites them, and it bites them hard. Okay? So as far as I'm concerned, if the question is to quote unquote clone or not clone, you're cloning. You are going to form a clone. You're going to form some kind of an entity to protect you, to give you some basic level of asset protection before you print up your first set of business cards, before you get out there and start doing business. Got it? Everybody got it? Let me see a thumbs up. Let me see a thumbs up or type thumbs up. Okay, so then the next question is, well, gee, Sherman, I've heard that there's some people who are out there doing real estate using trusts. Should I do a trust or should I form an LLC? And and you guys know you guys know where I'm coming from. We talked about this literally the first day. I know lots of you guys have all kinds of real estate investor education, all kinds of courses, boot camps, etc. And you may have heard some people talk about trust and using trust. There's nothing wrong with using trust when you know what you're doing. But when you're first getting started, I would strongly recommend that you don't use a trust. True life example. You guys know Lou Brown. We have Lou Brown come in and teach. And when I first got started as an investor back in 2001, I went to a seminar, heard Lou speak, teach, and he offered a program called the Whole Enchilada, which is all of his documents, all of his stuff. And Lou uses trust extensively. Now, understand, Lou's from Georgia. And they do things differently in Georgia than we do here in Maryland. And we do things different in Maryland, slightly different than what they do in Virginia and DC, right? So Lou was really, really big on trust. He kept on talking about trust over and over and over again when I went through his training. And he gave me copies of his trust in this program called the Whole Enchilada. I think it was a $15,000 investment, but it was literally all of his documents. And along the way, not my first deal, because my mentor, my coach showed me how to get deals done, and he never used trust. So he didn't teach me trust. But on one deal later on, maybe about 2-3 years later, I decided to buy a piece of property in a trust, and I downloaded Lou's document, and I gave it to the settlement attorney, and she said, "What's this?" And I said, "Well, it's a trust." She says, "I kind of know it's a trust, but where did you get it from?" That's why I went to this training, and the guy who was giving the training sold it to me along with some other documents. And she said, "You can't use this in Maryland." I said, "Well, what's the difference?" I mean, the guy who gave it to me uses it all the time. And she said, "Where's he from?" I said, "Georgia." He said, "Sherman, trusts and entities, the rules for how you use them and what they say is at the state level. Every state has a different set of rules. And you can't use this trust document in Maryland. It's not going to fly. There's not a title company in the world that would let you use this trust document to record a title and hold a property in Maryland." I'm like, "Geez, well, what do I need to do?" She said, "You can hire another lawyer, or if you give me enough time, I'll do it for you." And she created a new trust document for me that she only charged me $1,200 for. So I gave Lou $15,000. Now I got to give her $1,200. Now, don't hear what Sherman didn't say, right? I'm not trashing Lou. I'm not bashing him. Far from it. Lou taught me a whole lot of stuff about creative financing, and Lou gave me some documents or sold me some documents. But those documents were for deals in Georgia, not deals in Maryland. And I needed to run it past a competent Maryland attorney who said, "That's not going to fly here in Maryland. You need to use this." And then I had to pay for it all over again. Here's the bottom line. You guys are in this class to learn how to get deals done in 21 days or less. And using a trust as a vehicle to do that is probably going to mess you up. At some point in time in the future, when you get into the more advanced asset protection, yes, trust can make a lot of sense. But let me share a little something with you that I didn't know when I first got started as a real estate investor. Can you guys see my screen okay? And it says, "Here's your trust, pick one." Does it say, "Here's your trust, pick one"? Okay, here's your trust, pick one. These are all the different kinds of trusts that are out there. Simple trust, a complex trust, a qualified disability trust, an electing small business trust, grantor type trust, bankruptcy estates, descendants estates, qualified for federal trust, split interest charitable trust. And oh, by the way, on a split interest charitable trust, there's 4 different basic styles. In other words, just because the document says trust at the top doesn't tell you what kind of a trust it is. And oh, by the way, if you're going to buy a piece of property in the trust, where should you get that document from? Where should you get it from? Where should you get the trust document from? Anybody want to guess where you should get it from? Put it, yes, a lawyer, an attorney. Better yet, a knowledgeable attorney who knows exactly what you're trying to do with the trust and gives you the proper trust document. Now, there's nothing wrong with going to boot camp seminars or downloading stuff off the internet, but before you use it the first time, what should you do? Run it past your attorney. But Sherman, that's going to cost me money. Oh yeah, and a whole lot more money than it's going to cost you to form an LLC. A lot more, a lot more. But here's the real downside. Here's the insider scoop. Here's the downside of using trusts, especially when you're first getting started. Pretty much every time you use a trust in a real estate transaction, a lawyer is going to have to be involved. Your lawyer is going to have to look at it and bless it. And whoever you're doing business with on the other side of the table, their lawyer is going to have to get involved. And as a result, trust can become a very expensive way to do business. Now, should you use trust? Is there a good reason to use trust? Of course. When my wife and I bought the house we live in now, we used a trust. We used a trust for asset protection purposes. We hired an estate planning attorney who created that trust. And the house is held in a trust. And do we ever have any issues? All the frickin' time. I want to put solar panels on my house. The price tag to put solar panels on my house is like 55, 60 grand. So I'm like, I'm not going to just pull cash out. I'm going to go ahead and finance it because I can get financing at 3.9%. That means the cost of the solar panels is like $400 a month, which is a whole lot less than my electric bill. So it makes sense to do so. So I go to Tesla, say, I want to do solar panels. Like, great. I said, well, how do you want to pay for it? You know, here's what the bill's going to be after they do the whole design. I said, well, okay, are there any financing options? Sure, we got a couple of financing companies. So they turned all my paperwork over to the financing company. And here we are 6 months later, still going through the same freaking Groundhog Day. Here's how it goes. Gee, Mr. Ragland, we don't see that your name is on the title to your house. Of course not, because I own it at a trust. Okay, sir, well, can you send us a copy of the trust document? I sent you a copy of the trust document 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. Do you really want me to send it to you again? And oh, by the way, all this stuff is uploaded. You're not actually getting a live person until you stay on hold for a while. And they go, oh yeah, Mr. Ragland, we see that we have the trust document, but we don't see that you're named as the trustee. I said, page 12. Can you look at page 12? Because like this, you're the 15th person I've had this conversation with. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I see. Yes, there it is right there. I'll tell you what, let me take it to underwriting. Can you hold for a second? 8 minutes later. Okay, sir. Well, everything should be good to go. How do I know it's good to go? Well, I gave it to the underwriter and I'm sure it's fine. And okay, are you going to send me something? No, sir, I can't do that. Okay, so how do I know we're good? Well, tell you what, why don't you just call back tomorrow? I said, call back tomorrow like I've called back every day for 3 months now. People don't understand trust. They don't understand it. Somebody says, don't you love it? This has nothing to do with the information age. They have the information. They don't know what the hell they're looking at. Because 99.9% of all the deals they do, they're like, okay, here's the applicant. Okay, here's their FICO score. Okay, here's their name on the deed. They get mine to go, okay, here's the application. Okay, here's the FICO score. Okay, there's no name on the deed. He doesn't own the property. No, I don't own the property. My trust does. Oh, man. Not everybody understands trust. On top of which, not everybody uses the right kind of trust. And quite honestly, every state sort of has its preferred way of doing business. I've been doing business as a real estate investor full-time for 22 years now. There are very few title attorneys who understand trusts, but all of them understand LLCs. Because in Maryland, that's the preferred way of doing business. That's the preferred way of taking title. Go to Texas, go to Florida, go to Georgia, maybe it's trusts. California, from what I understand, and I'm not a California resident, so I'm getting this secondhand from friends of mine like Kathy Fedke, who runs a big real estate group out in California. They've recently outlawed trusts or certain kinds of trusts as a way to take title to a piece of property, but they haven't outlawed LLCs. But the bottom line is this. You guys signed up for this class to learn how to get deals done quickly. Speed. To speed your friend, like how to get deals done every 21 days. Well, how quickly are you going to get deals done, and how inexpensively are you going to get deals done if every time you decide to do a deal using a trust, you got to hire a lawyer, the person who want to wholesale the deal has to hire a lawyer, The attorney who's doing the underwriting and the hard money lender who's loaning has to, in other words, everybody's got to get a legal review on your document, your trust document. It is going to gum your works up so bad, you're going to throw in the towel, in my opinion, and walk away. Because you'd be like, I could never get a deal done. Well, why couldn't you get a deal done? Well, I got this trust document I downloaded off the internet, and I took it to Legal Shield, and Legal Shield said it looked good. But every time I tried to use that thing, it just, all my deals blew up. If trusts work in Georgia, and trusts work in Florida, and trusts work in Texas, and you're in those jurisdictions, by all means, use a trust. But if you're in Maryland, hang on using them trusts until you're ready to start doing some serious asset protection and can afford to pay the $800 an hour lawyers to draft the kind of documents that you need to be able to do what you want to do. But in the meantime, let's get some deals done. Let's put some money in the bank. Let's make some things happen. So bottom line is this: we're not really going to be using any kind of trust whatsoever when we first get started in this business. Unless, of course, you're in a jurisdiction where that's kind of the standard way they do business. And if it is the standard way they do business, there'll kind of be a standard trust document out there that you can use over and over and over and over and over and over again, okay? So first thing we need to talk about is this difference between a trust and an entity. And the main difference between a trust and an entity is that a trust is created when you go see a lawyer and they create the document and you sign the document. And oftentimes, is the case, you have to evidence that you created the trust by writing a check or putting up a de minimis amount of money. In other words, a minor amount of money. So as an example, many of you guys know that I am into firearms. I'm an NRA instructor. I teach people how to use firearms, and a couple of my kids also are into it. My wife, on the other hand, she don't even want to hear about it. That's not her thing. So firearms are a pretty complicated thing. If I wanted to give any one of you guys or any of my children one of my firearms, let's say we go to the range together and you put it in your hand, scared of it, and then I sort of guide you, coach you, because I am an instructor, and you're like, wow, this is kind of cool. Sherman, how much was this thing? And I said, well, I'm actually thinking about getting rid of it. Like, hey, will you sell it to me? So, if you pay me what I paid for it, yeah. Does it have the manual? Sure, I keep all my manuals. Does it have the instruction box? Yeah, I got the box, everything. I keep all that stuff. Well, will you sell it to me? Sure. Great. Can I give you cash? Whoa, hang on. There is a federally regulated process for the transfer of firearm. In addition to which, some states even say you can't even hold a firearm unless you have certain licensure. Okay? It's a fairly complicated process. I'll just leave it at that. So if I happen to have a handful of firearms, let's say, and it's my intention that at some point in time in the future that I hand those over to one or both of my kids who also enjoy shooting sports with me, I can do one of two things. When the time comes, assuming I'm amongst the living, go down to the local gun shop, give them the firearm, pay them a fee, have my children register to receive it, and then sometime after 4, 5, 6, 7 days, depending on which jurisdiction I'm in, it goes from me to my children, and in the meantime, the middleman makes 100 or so bucks. Option A. Option B, form a trust. And instead of me owning them, the trust owns them, and make myself both the beneficiary as well as the trustee, and make my kids beneficiaries of the trust. If I should die prematurely, like anytime I die and I'm not ready to go, please, those firearms weren't owned by me, they were owned by the trust. And therefore totally bypasses the need to settle the estate and figure out what's what and pay all these fees. No, because I, as an individual, did not own them. They were owned by the trust. And because I was a beneficiary of the trust, I had the right to use, as would my children, as do my children, because that's exactly what I did. If I'm mentally incapacitated, if I get Alzheimer's, if I have a stroke, Rather than having to go through all that, let's hire lawyers, figure out what to do with dad's stuff. The trust owns it, and my kids are the beneficiary. And when they become of age and they want to take responsibility, then they can become a co-trustee and say what happens with the things that are owned by the trust. They decide to sell them, liquidate them, and have cash, then there's cash in the trust that they can divvy up and share amongst their siblings. But here's the fundamental principle that we need to understand. The creation of the trust happens when a lawyer creates the document and I sign the documents and I put up some minimal amount of money to say, hey, for this $1 and other valuable consideration, the trust is created, and whatever assets are owned by the trust now no longer belong to me, they belong to the trust. And how those assets are dispensed with, dispersed with, whatever, is the responsibility of the trustee of the trust. And the people who get the benefit of whatever the trust owns are the beneficiary. But never in that process do I run down to the state or do I run down to the county and register the trust. Trusts, as a general rule, are not registered at the state level. The state has no knowledge. They have no idea of what happened there. At some point in time in the future, when somebody says, okay, whose stuff is this? If you present the trust document, which is why you keep this stuff in a safe, you go, oh, that didn't belong to Sherman, it belonged to the trust. Therefore, whatever obligation Sherman had, these aren't included because technically these aren't his, they belong to the trust. But trusts are created by lawyers, not governments. And the only place where, quote unquote, there's this intersection between the trust documents and the county or the state or the township is when you buy real estate, because ownership of real estate and the deed for real estate is a public document. So how does that work? Your lawyer creates the trust, you fund the trust, you name a trustee and a beneficiary, and then when the time comes for you to buy a piece of property, certain portions of the trust document are presented to the county, but they don't stay at the county. It doesn't get recorded at the county. You just display the document to show evidence that a trust exists. But they don't get to keep those documents. Those documents now go back in the safe. Nobody can Google, not Google, excuse me. Well, yeah, Google. Nobody can Google, nobody can go online, nobody can find your trust documents. So the reason why people who have assets and are interested in asset protection get excited about trusts is because there's a tremendous amount of anonymity. There's no trail. Why is there no trail? Because the government didn't create the document. The lawyer created the document. And the government just wants to see the document and they can see it, but they don't get to keep it. They don't get to record it. They don't get to put it in the microfiche or online. That's why trusts are so popular amongst investors once they start accumulating wealth. However, think about what I just said. A lawyer had to create it. Another lawyer gets to see it. And every time you're involved in a transaction where they find out that your property is held by a trust, some underwriter wants to see your trust document and it just slows everything down. It's a great way to keep your name totally out of the public record, but it's also a great way to say, okay, every time I do something with this property, somebody's going to want to see the document. Somebody's going to want to see underwriting. There's going to be an additional amount of time and cost involved in dealing with that asset because that asset's held in a trust. And I know that for some people hearing this the first time that can get a little complicated. I'm trying to really break it down and make it plain. Does anybody have any questions on what I just said about trusts? Please type them in the chat box so I can answer them. Alicia says, by the way, the personal protection classes that involve both firearms and non-firearms, I'll be talking about next week. All right, but we do have those classes on the calendar for February. Promise. All right. All right. So, do you have questions? Thank you, Dee. So very clear on trust. And by the way, if I'm not totally clear, but I'm kind of clear enough, I think as we go along, it'll become clearer. Do you get tax ID numbers for trust? Typically not. Normally, you're not getting a tax ID for trust unless The trust itself is operating as a business, and anytime anything's operating as a business, the IRS wants to tax it. Normally, a trust is somewhat neutral. It's a place you put assets. Now, the assets themselves will have to pay taxes, right? And when your tax returns are done, you'll have to pay taxes. But trusts are generally what's known as a pass-through entity. Okay, generally. All right. Other questions? Other questions? Other questions? Other questions? All right. So you guys are kind of getting the hang a little bit of trust. And again, for the purpose of this class, I'm not trying to get, eyeball deep in trust, and I'm not trying to get eyeball deep in asset protection. I'm just throwing it out there to say, if your objective is to get your first deal done and get it done in 21 days or less, you don't want to be anywhere near a trust, because a trust is going to be more expensive and it's going to slow you down. That's all. Fundamentally, that's really all I'm trying to say about trust. I'm not saying trusts are bad. I'm not saying trusts are good. I'm just saying they're a different kind of animal, a different kind of structure, and they have some complications that go along with them, because what's the intent of the trust? What is it you're trying to do? You're trying to shelter almost 100% your ownership of an asset. And since trusts aren't created at the state level, and since trust documents are never kept by a state entity, once you show it and you're out of there, they don't get to see the page that says who the beneficiaries are. They don't get to see that. And therefore, it's never a part of the public record. It is the ultimate way to make sure that your name never comes up when somebody does a Google search to see what you own. Whereas creating entities, because entities are chartered by the state, there's always going to be a paper trail when you create an entity. And that's the main difference between trusts and entities. Okay? All right. Did you initially purchase your house through a trust or transferred it? In the case of the house I'm in now, because we built this house from the ground up, from day one, it was going to be placed into a trust. We didn't transfer from fee simple ownership or sort of sole proprietor ownership, so to speak, into a trust. We didn't do that. And for the most part, most of my investment properties, I tend to purchase in an LLC. And that's what I'm going to teach you guys next and show you how to do that. And you're going to actually do that. But I do have a couple of properties besides my primary residence that I do own in a trust. And I'm telling you, every time I have to go for financing, every time I have to go for any kind of an approval, it's the whole kabuki dance every time I'm dealing with a property that's in a trust. Having said that, it does give you some tremendous anonymity because your name's not anywhere. And quite frankly, now I'm getting deeper than I want to get, but I could literally transfer the ownership of a property if it's in a trust by simply writing a note and putting it in the file. Whereas you can't typically do that with an LLC. Well, you can do it, but not quite as smoothly. All right, in any event, now I'm starting to get bogged down. That's not my goal. That's not my objective. We're trying to stay at that point where we're getting that first deal done. And I'm just telling you guys, if your objective is to get the first deal done and to get deals done quickly, stay away from the trust. Let's focus on the other types of entities. And the primary entity that we tend to use in real estate is the LLC. And here's why. Okay. So you guys can see my screen, okay, that says here's your entities. Pick one. Yes. Can you see that? Here's your entities. Can you guys see that? No? I'm looking for a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. All right, so entities, like first thing you see is like the list is a whole lot smaller, right? Isn't this list of entities a whole lot smaller than this list of trusts? Entities are just a simpler process. And the reason for that is because entities are created at the state level. And the states kind of sort of over the years have a uniform way in which they like to see things. And if something becomes popular in one state, it's not long before it's popular in another state. And they kind of adopt similar kind of policies, procedures. Having said that, all entities are created at the state level. There's no such thing as a federal incorporation. You don't go to a federal website or a US government website to create an entity. And if you ever get an email or a letter in the mail saying, hey, create your US, at us.co.gov, you can pretty much throw it in a trash can because it's a ripoff. Entities are created at the state level. It's one of those powers that uniquely belongs to the state. And because it belongs to the state based on what's in the US Constitution, which you guys all have a copy of now and hopefully are reading, anything that is inherently a state's right or state's power, the federal government cannot intervene. So the federal government can't create a system for registering entities. It happens at the state level, and it will continue to happen at the state level. And without some major rewrite of the Constitution or some new amendment, it's going to continue to be a state function, not a federal function. Got it? So that means I'm going to give you the generalities, but the specifics of creating an entity are done state by state by state. Okay? So here's the deal. Here's your choice of entities. Number one, you can operate as a sole proprietorship. Now, technically, a sole proprietorship is not an entity. I've already said that. However, if you don't form an entity and you don't form a trust and you get out there and start doing business, in the eyes of the government, you are a sole proprietor. In the eyes of the government, you're a sole proprietor. If you don't take the formal action of creating an entity or the formal action of creating a trust, and you are out there doing business, you have business cards, you have flyers, right? In the eyes of the government, you're a sole proprietor. You go to a boot camp, you come to a club meeting, you hear Sherman speak, you decide you're going to print up some flyers and walk around the neighborhood saying, hey, we buy houses. Did you form an entity first? No. Did you go see a lawyer and form a trust first? No. I just printed up some flyers. In the eyes of the government, you're out there operating as a sole proprietor. And if anything goes wrong, you have unlimited liability for your actions. Well, Sherman, what could possibly go wrong? I don't know. You're out there, you got flyers, the flyers blow out of your hand because it's a blustery March day. The flyers blow in front of somebody's car, and in that split second, they're blinded and they swerve over the median and have a head-on collision. And the person they have a head-on collision with is gravely injured, and they hire a lawyer and they sue. And the guy who's being sued says, well, if it wasn't for these flyers that flew in my face, what fly? Well, I actually kept one of them. Who are they coming after next? You! You're like, oh my gosh, well, my car insurance will cover it. And your car insurance goes, were you driving at the time? No, we ain't gonna cover it. You're like, well, right after that accident happened, I did form an entity. I'm good. Well, the accident happened on this date. You didn't form the entity until that date. Well, how would they know that? Because they went online and saw the date you formed your entity 3 days after the accident. Because you kind of sort of knew, maybe I might be in trouble. I better go do something. Well, you should have done something before you stepped out on the street and printed up the flyers. Now, look, I know that's sort of a wild exaggeration, but you know what? In the litigious world we live in today, that kind of stuff can happen. It can happen. And you kind of want to have that suit of armor on if something like that should happen. Worse yet, in most crimes, did I mention to you guys that I actually got a B+ also in my criminal procedure class? I know I'm not a lawyer. I'm not trying to be one. But do you guys know that most crimes have something called a statute of limitations? So let's say that something happened, and I say crimes, it doesn't have to necessarily be quote unquote criminal. It could be civil. Civil actions also have statute of limitations. And something happens and you just kind of forget about it because it happened 2 or 3 years ago. But the statute of limitations for that state says, for this particular action, you could bring a lawsuit up to 5 years later. And your financial situation changes dramatically in 5 years. And now all of a sudden somebody sees your name in the paper and like, I remember that guy. He was the one walking around the neighborhood with them flyers, and I got in that car accident at that time. And I didn't really do anything about it, but look, his name's all in the paper. Let me go talk to a lawyer. Like, oh, good thing you saw me, because the statute of limitations runs out at the end of the month. We better go sue him now. And you're acting as a sole proprietor. And you have unlimited liability, even though now you've put together all the proper asset protections, but it doesn't matter. At the point in time where the incident happened, you didn't have an entity. And you're still liable, potentially. So the bottom line is this. Entities are created at the state level. If you don't form an entity, if you don't go pay somebody to create a trust, and you can demonstrate that you're operating on the behest of the trust, which kind of frankly is a little hard to do. You can't be walking around with "We Buy Houses" signs, and at the bottom of your flyer it says, contact so-and-so Mother Mary Trust. That's just plain weird. Although I have seen some late night gurus try to say that that's a good way to do business, but it's kind of weird. And if you wind up having to go before a judge and you tell some weird story, chances are the judge is going to laugh and then hit you anyway, right? And I don't mean hit you physically, I mean hit you with the fine or whatever. So for the most part, you're going to be doing business. And when you're doing business as an employee, as a partner, as a member of your entity. And your flyers that say we buy houses at the very bottom should say such and such, whatever you call your company, LLC, or such and such LLP, limited partnership, or such and such Inc. In other words, if something happens and somebody looks at that flyer, you know, you're handing out flyers and you don't know, in that particular community, it's illegal to hand out flyers and you get hit with a $500 fine. If you were handing out flyers and it was a result of you doing business through your entity, then your entity's name should be on it. And when the fine comes, it's not you personally being fined, it's your company. And if the fine is too great, you know, you set up the entity for $100, but the fine is $500, you're like, you know what? Put the entity out of its misery. Bang, bang, bang. Put the entity out of its misery and create a new one. And keep on walking. But they're not coming after you personally because you weren't doing business as a sole proprietor. So the first rule of business is form some kind of entity. And it should be an entity, not a trust. And that's going to be the shield through which you do all your business, the vehicle through which you do all business. And your entity name should be on all of your marketing materials. When you are out there making offers for properties, and we're going to start off making offers on properties through what's called the multiple listing service, the MLS, and using border realtor contracts. And I'll talk why we want to go that route next week when we really get into it, knee deep into it. But the first question is going to be asked is, who's the buyer? Well, the buyer is not you personally. The buyer is your entity. And you are an officer of your entity. Why? Because that gives you that first level of asset protection. Because if you don't do it that way, you're doing business as a sole proprietor. And if something blows up, if something gets screwed up, if you did something wrong, you want to be able to take a look at it and go, okay, well, what's the penalty for doing something wrong? Oh, a $500 fine? You know what? I'm going to just go ahead and shut down this entity and create a new one for $100 because it's cheaper than paying the fine. Oh, I did something wrong and there's possibly some civil fine or criminal, whatever, but I was doing it through my entity and my entity is going to be the fall guy. You know what? Sorry, entity, I love you much, but you're out of here. But if you don't have that entity, everything that blows up on you. You have no shield, you have no protection. All right, so sole proprietorship is what happens when you don't consciously choose to create an entity and let the world know that you're doing business on behalf of your entity. If you don't do that, if you don't take those two steps, create the entity and then let everybody know, hey, I'm a member of the entity, I'm the managing member, I'm the president, I'm doing this on behalf of the entity, then you are acting as a sole proprietor. So we need to create the entity and we need to make sure that people understand whatever you're doing on behalf of the entity. You're not doing it on your own. If you don't take those two steps, then you are acting as a sole proprietor. And anything that blows up on you personally. Got it? If you got it, give me a thumbs up. If you got it, say in the chat box, got it. And I know it sounds like I'm whipping a dead point, but I really want people to get this before I move on. Okay? Next, general partnership. You can have general partnerships that are two sole proprietors. You can have general partnerships that's a sole proprietor and somebody with an entity, right? Or you can have a general partnership between two entities. Generally speaking, a general partnership is one where you are not registering it with the state, and anything that general partnership does could blow up and stick to the partners of the general partnership. Now look, if you have an entity, you're good to go. If the other person has an entity, you're good to go. If you have an entity and they don't have an entity and something blows up, it's on them because you have an entity. But if they have an entity, like they're an LLC, they're like, hey, Sherman, and you're like, hey, Sherman, can I bring you some deals? And I'm like, sure, you can bring me some deals. Okay, well, would you mind having a contract between the two of us? So that's just a one-pager? Sure, I don't have a problem with that. I'm signing as an officer of my entity. I'm not going to be a party to that agreement. My company, my entity will be. But if you sign your document as Fred Smith, and I sign mine as Sherman Ragland, managing member of Tradewinds Realty Partners, and something blows up, I'm protected. But you, Fred Smith, you are not. What is a situation where you have a general partnership? Again, a general partnership is one where you have not consciously said to the state, oh, we are formally partners. We're going to take the formality of creating a partnership. It's just me out there working with Sherman. But Sherman says, okay, if we're out there working, I'm working through my entity. You're not working with me personally, you're working through my entity. And the fact that you see me here, you're not seeing me, you're seeing me in my capacity as the managing member of my entity. You, on the other hand, chose not to form an entity, and therefore you're acting as a sole proprietor. Our partnership, however, if we have a piece of paper, even if we don't register at the state, is a partnership agreement. Our email, we don't actually do a full-blown partnership agreement. We just have an email and a mutual understanding between us that we're out there partnering together. But I'm doing it through my entity, you're doing it as sole proprietor. If something hits the fan, it ain't gonna stick on me because I'm acting in my capacity as a managing member of an entity, but it will fully stick on you. Because in a general partnership, both parties to the partnership have 100% liability for the actions of the partnership. Everybody understand that? And generally speaking, a general partnership is one that is not formed at the state level. There's just some kind of a document, a letter, an email, something that memorializes the fact that we're doing business together. Or we're out there representing to the world that we're doing business together. We put a website together. You're at a club meeting, you're on Meetup, you're out there saying, hey, I'm Sherman's partner and we're doing this stuff together. And we have some kind of understanding that's through an email, whatever, but you don't have an entity and I do. We have what's known as a general partnership, and anything that blows up is going to blow up fully on you, and it's going to blow up on me, but it's going to hit my entity, and that's where it's going to stop. Does everybody understand that? Does everybody understand that? If you understand, give me a thumbs up or say, yes, I understand. All right. Somebody was saying, does a tax preparer consider LLC sole proprietor? An LLC, let me say it one more time. A sole proprietorship is when you consciously choose not to form an entity, but you get out there and do business. If you wind up generating profits or you wind up generating losses, your tax preparer may very well go ahead and put it on what's called a Schedule C, meaning you didn't create an entity, because if you had created an entity, he would create a different kind of schedule. On a corporation, it's like a Schedule S, and I can't remember what it is for an LLC. If you form an LLC, if you form a C Corp, if you form a trust, although you don't generally have a trust that you're doing operating business through, but if you form an LLC, a C Corp, an S Corp, etc., it is its own thing. It will have its own tax return. It'll have its own identity. And you are acting in the capacity of being an officer, a member, excuse me, or a managing member of that entity. Does everybody understand that? You got it? You got it? Yeah. Again, if you don't fully get it, that's okay. By the time we're done in the next 2 weeks, you're going to fully get it, because we're going to be using entities like nothing. I mean, like you've never used before. All right, so sole proprietorship, general partnership, in both cases, you're not registering anything with the state. You're just out there doing business. And you have business cards printed up, you've got flyers printed up, you got a website out there, and nowhere in that website do I see the name of your entity. Why? Because you didn't create one. So, well, Sherman, I can't be a sole proprietor and I can't be a general partner because I never registered at the state. Yes, that's the point. You never bothered to register anywhere, and therefore, in the eyes of the state, you're not an entity. You're not an LLC. You have no protection. You're operating on your own. You have no clone. You have no armor. And if anything blows up, it's all on you, because you didn't take that additional step to say, hey, by the way, I'm putting the state and the world on notice that when you see me, you ain't seeing me, you're seeing the managing member of my entity. You're seeing the president of my entity. And I'm acting in my capacity, my official capacity, as an officer or a member of an entity. And when it blows up, it's not blowing up on me personally, it's blowing up on my entity. But you have to take that formal step to make that happen. Question is, are there instances where an LLC will not protect you? Yes. Please write this down. Fraud is never a protection for anything. If you are accused of, and it is proven that you acted in a fraudulent manner, then whoever's coming after you can do what's known as piercing the corporate veil. And piercing the corporate veil generally happens in two instances. One, you did not do the corporate formalities that were required by the state. So if the state says you got to file an annual report and you don't file an annual report, and your 1 year anniversary comes up and you have not filed the annual report by the deadline, you are no longer in good standing. When you are in good standing, you begin to lose the protections that are given to you by having an entity. If you miss filing an annual report for more than 1 or 2 years, depending upon the state, your entity might be forfeited. If you're still out there doing business using your business name, but you're not in good standing, or worse, your entity has been forfeited, you no longer have the protection of that entity. If the state says you got to keep books and records, if the state says you got to file an annual fee, if the state says there's certain formalities that you must do to get the benefits of having your clone recognized as being its own separate living, breathing thing, and you don't do what the state tells you to do, you can give up your right to have the protection. Oftentimes you can correct that, no harm, no foul, even if you get in trouble. However, the one thing that you can never get around is if you are accused of, and it is found that, it's not just the accusation, they have to actually find that you committed fraud. If you have fraudulent activities, if you say one thing, do something else, if you represent something and do something else, if you are found to be fraudulent, I don't want to use the word conviction because conviction normally goes with a criminal activity, and fraud can, in some cases, be criminal. But if it's found that you use fraud in your business practices, then you automatically lose the protections of the entity. So those are kind of the two instances. There could be others. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving you legal advice. But right off the top of my head, I know for a fact that committing fraud, and again, it's not just being accused of committing fraud, because oftentimes people say, well, so-and-so committed fraud, they were fraudulent, and you never want to be fraudulent. Having said that, sometimes people hear what they want to hear. Sometimes people hear stuff you didn't actually say. And that's why I oftentimes say, don't hear what Sherman didn't say. And I make sure that we correct the information, and I'm absolutely positively correcting information. And sometimes I say stuff so fast that it comes out, and I'm like, wait a minute, I need to correct that, and I correct it. Because if anybody ever comes back and says, well, Sherman, you said, I want to be able to have some kind of a recording or something. Said, no, I didn't say that. Or if I did say it, I was using it as an example of what not to do. But the bottom line is this: in all of your business activities, act like somebody's recording it, act like they're wearing a wire, and you're going to hear it again in front of a judge. And if the thought of that makes you cringe, you need to take a really hard look in the mirror to say, am I acting in an ethical and honest manner? And if you're not, there's no protection in the world, no LLC, no trust, no nothing that's going to protect you if you're acting in an unethical and fraudulent manner. So that, quote unquote, trumps everything. Fraud trumps everything. And once it's proven that you've committed fraud, the repercussions of that become very serious very, very quickly. So those are the instances I know of off the top of my head where an LLC will not give you adequate protection. If you A, don't do the formalities, or B, commit fraudulent acts. Okay? Any other questions? And I am going to keep on moving along. All right, so again, sole proprietorship is when you're doing business and you have not officially declared that you're doing it as an entity or create the entity. General partnership, again, is when you don't bother to file paperwork, but you're doing business together with somebody, two different groups, two different people, two different entities. Limited liability partnership, now we're getting into actually taking an affirmative step and filing paperwork. So a limited liability partnership or limited partnership, LP, LLP, LLP, LP, right? That's when you have limited partners and general partners. We're generally not going to use LLPs or limited partnerships for our real estate activities. There was a point in time where that was very, 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 very popular. If I was raising money through what's called a syndication, I might very well have my company operating as a corporation, be the general partner, and then have my investors coming in as limited partners. And the main thing about LLPs is that there's always a general partner, and that general partner has unlimited liability, And then you can have one or more limited partners who have no liability. Why? Because the limited partners are not allowed to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the business. And back in the old days, like call it pre-1970s, pre-1980s, before everybody was using LLCs, when LLCs were still sort of early in the game and people still didn't understand what they were, the main way that people did business was either through corporations or limited partnerships. And the number one way that real estate entities did business was a general partner, oftentimes and almost always a corporation, responsible for the day-to-day affairs of the company, and then the investors being limited partners. That changed almost overnight in the mid to late 1980s as more and more states adopted this thing called limited liability companies. And I'll get to limited liability companies in a second. In fact, that'll be the last thing we talk about because that's the most important thing we need to talk about. C corporations. So a C corporation is a corporation that from the very outset, the state says it is a separate legal entity. It has its own tax ID number. It files its own tax returns. It is totally unique and distinct from its owners. C corps go all the way back to jolly old England and even before. It was the number one tool that ship owners used when more and more ships started sailing towards the New World. And oftentimes what would happen is a ship would leave the dock and never come back. And what would happen is the owners of the ships were being sued left and right by the families of the deceased seamen. And so the powers that be said, hey, is there a way that we can protect ourselves from the lawsuits when these ships go down? We're talking 1600s, right? And so the whole idea of a corporation owning a ship, so that if the ship was lost, if you're going to sue anybody, you had to sue the corporation. You couldn't sue us personally, us who put our money together to fund the ship, right? So C corps go way, way back, predate the founding of the United States of America. They go way, way back. And it was always generally understood that a C corp was a clone. It was an entity that was created that was separate and distinct from the owners. If something bad happened in the company, you couldn't come back and touch the owners of the corporation. Everybody got that? If you got it, give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if you got it. All right. All right. So the problem with a C corp is that a C corp has to pay taxes. We said, wait a minute. C corp makes money. It pays its taxes to the tax man because, again, in the eyes of the state and in the eyes of the federal government, the IRS, a corporation is separate, unique, and different from the individuals who own it. As Mitt Romney said, corporations are people. And from that vantage point, he was correct. You have your social security number. Corporation has what's known as an EIN, or employee identification number, which is the same thing as a social security number for a corporation. The corporation pays its taxes, right, at the corporate tax rate. And then if you're the owner of a corporation and you want to get some of your money back, the corporation has to issue what's called dividends. But the dividends that you get, or the distributions that you get to the corporation, then you turn around and pay taxes on that too. So wait a minute, that's not fair. I own the corporation. I own 100% of the corporation. Why should I pay taxes in the corporation and then have to pay taxes again once I get my money? Because in the eyes of the government, you're two different entities. In the eyes of the government, your corporation is a living, breathing thing. Maybe not a human, but a living, breathing thing. It has its own tax ID number. You have your own tax ID number. It pays taxes, and if it gives you money because it's its own thing, you got to pay taxes on the money that you get. Does everybody understand that? If you understand, give me a thumbs up. All right. So somewhere along the way, and I don't remember when, so please don't ask me when did that happen, the federal government said, you know what, that is kind of unfair, especially to small business owners. That's kind of unfair. We ought to give small business some kind of relief by allowing their businesses to do business and the business not have to pay taxes, and any profits that the business makes, it just simply gives it back to the owner or owners, and then they pay taxes. And so the federal government created this pass-through concept at the corporate level. Now, do you guys remember what I said about who charters companies, who charters corporations? Is it the feds or the state? How many people say feds? How many people say state? Is it the feds or state? State, 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 state. Exactly. Corporations and entities are chartered at the state level. So the state has no say in federal taxation. So here's how this works. Many years ago, and again, I don't know when, the federal government created something called the S Corporation, S Corp. It is a federal designation that allows your corporation to make money, earn a profit, turn the profits over to you without paying taxes, and then you pay the taxes on your personal tax return. So it turns a C Corp into an S Corp by allowing you to have that pass-through operation. And that's pass-through both in profits and losses. So if your corporation has losses, you can offset whatever you make in your personal life, okay? Now, S Corps have certain restrictions. Only a limited number of individuals can own an S Corp. Don't ask me what it is. I don't know what it is. I don't care what it is, because my corporation is an S Corp, but I'm 100% owner, and I have no intention of sharing it with anybody else. I think it's 30, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. Other limitation. Corporations cannot own S corporations. Only individual tax-paying citizens can. Last restriction that I know of, there could be more, but it's kind of important. Foreign entities and foreign citizens cannot own an S corporation. Only a US citizen who's an individual who has a social security number can own an S corp. And there's a limitation as to how many of those individuals can be owners. So an S corp is not necessarily this great quote unquote panacea, because there are some really severe restrictions that prevent it from being widely used. Here's the most important thing. Every S corporation that is an S corporation starts off as a C corporation. The way an S corporation becomes an S corporation is it files a document with the federal government saying, hey, I know I was born a C corp, but I want to change my gender to an S corp. Got it? So you don't go to the state and say, hey, I want to file an S corp. You go to the state and say, I want to file an S corp. They're like, what are you talking about? As far as we're concerned, all corporations are corporations. And they're right. If you want to become an S corp, you have to file that piece of paper with the IRS within a certain period of time, and you can change it back, yada, 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 yada. But all corporations are created as C corporations. And then to become an S, you go to the federal government, specifically the IRS, and say, I want S corp designation. Everybody got it? You got to give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs up. Yes, 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 yes. So, about early 1970s, and I can't remember which state it was. I think it was a Western state, but don't quote me on that. Somebody in the state legislature came up with this idea of something called a limited liability company, or LLC. And the thought process behind a limited liability company was, you know, limited partnerships, C corporations, and S corporations can get a little complicated. And if we could wave a magic wand and put together the best qualities of each one of these three ways of forming an entity, why not do it? So a limited liability company, and don't you ever let me catch you calling it a limited liability corporation. It's not. It's limited liability company. A limited liability company does not have stockholders. C corps, S corps have stockholders, and as I said before, all companies that are S corps started off as C corps, and then switched their tax designation. Limited liability companies don't have stockholders. Limited liability companies have members, and those members can either be individuals or other entities. An LLC can be a member of another LLC. An S corp can be a member of another LLC. A C corp can be a member of another LLC. A trust can be a member of an LLC. So from the standpoint of tax planning and asset protection, there's just tremendous flexibility if you happen to have some of your assets held by a trust, if you happen to have certain people who want to have a seat at the table that are individuals, if you want to partner with somebody who wants to come into the entity through another entity. So the LLC concept is tremendously flexible in that regard. In addition to which, you can tell the IRS when you create your LLC whether or not you want it to have pass-through taxability. In other words, it generates profits, passes the profits back to the respective members, and the members pay taxes, or if you want to have your LLC taxed like a corporation. You pay the taxes when you make the money, and any distributions or any that's what I'm looking for, distributions or disbursements or dividends are taxed also. Although God knows why anybody would want to do that, but you have the ability to do so. So the bottom line is, whatever the state was, and I can't remember what it was, y'all can Google it later, and quite frankly, I don't care what it was, so don't be putting in the chat box, oh, Sherman, it was such and such. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Because as time went on, every state in the Union and U.S. territories adopted LLC legislation. And now, LLCs are by far the most popular way to form an entity at the state level. So a lot of people are asking me, Sherman, what do you recommend? For me, if you don't have a current entity, LLC to me is the way to go. I have an S corporation. It started as a C corporation. It is the primary way I've been doing business for going on almost 35 years. It still exists. It still pays taxes. It still files its forms. But when I started creating new businesses, new relationships, new partnerships, LLCs were the way that I chose to go. And I have probably over the past 20 years created somewhere close to 50 maybe LLCs. And I have a fairly good idea as to how to do them. Fortunately, here in Maryland, you don't have to hire a lawyer to do an LLC. That may not be true in the state where you live if you are not doing business in Maryland. But in Maryland, you can just go online and fill in the blanks online. 2-3 years ago, before Maryland fully automated this stuff and put it online, you could basically go to Preston Street and sit there at their computers that they provided with little printers and download the PDF forms, fill them out, and turn them in at the counter. Maryland, I think, is kind of unique that way. I've never gone to where you register entities in Virginia because it's down in Richmond. In Maryland, it's in Baltimore, but for the most part today, it's really online, and I think Virginia's probably pretty much online. But DC used to go up North Capitol Street, and when you walk into the office of DC to form an entity, and you hand in the paperwork, they say something to like, well, your paperwork's not correct. He said, well, what do I need to change? And I said, you need to go talk to your lawyer because we're not lawyers. We're not allowed to give legal advice. I'm like, good Lord of money. And that's just, again, it's just a totally different mindset as to how they did things in DC. Now, again, I haven't done it in a while, so I don't know if it's still true, but here's the deal. Entities are done at the state level. Because LLCs have all this flexibility and have the ability to have that pass-through feature, which means it doesn't pay taxes and then you have to pay taxes again, it's by far the most popular way to do business. And for the most part, because Maryland is a very popular real estate state, there's a lot of publicly traded real estate entities that, for whatever reason, decided to form in Maryland. Marriott's a Maryland corporation. Many of the real estate projects in downtown DC are Maryland LLCs. Many of the publicly traded REITs, big boys, are formed in Maryland. So Maryland has kind of this history of using LLCs for real estate projects, big and small. So if you're doing business in Maryland and you're doing real estate, you're going to find that you're going to have a lot more support for what you're doing if you form an LLC versus an LLP or a C Corp or an S Corp. And generally speaking, it doesn't kind of really matter which one you form, but if one's easier, there's more information, you can get more help, I'd kind of gravitate in that direction. So while I cannot give you legal advice because I don't know your specific circumstance and know you well enough to say, do this versus that, I can just simply say what I do and why I do it. And if you decide to follow my footsteps, more power to you. I use LLCs. It's a really simple, straightforward process in Maryland. Now, here's the next thing you need to know. Most lawyers, most CPAs will tell you it's in your best interest to form an LLC in the state where you plan on doing business. Again, LLCs are created at the state level. Corporations are created at the state level. LLPs are created at the state level. There's no city in Maryland that incorporates corporations or provides you with a charter to form an LLC. It happens at the state level. And in Maryland, it just so happens that the state agency responsible for it, the State Department of Assessment and Taxation, otherwise known as SDAT, S-D-A-T, is based in Baltimore. But it really doesn't matter anymore because so much of what you can do online. It doesn't matter where physically they're located in the state because you can do it all online. And I generally recommend today you just do it online. Now in Maryland, they have, for the interim period, hired a third-party contractor to get it done and get it done efficiently. And so that third-party contractor tax on a $9 fee when you do it online. But there's no real difference between doing it online versus going all the way up to Preston Street. I used to say go to Preston Street because if you went to Preston Street, you could take the paperwork with you. And if you forgot your paperwork, they'd have computers there and you could type stuff in, print it out on the printers and just do it right there. But, and if you did it there, you could generally be in and out of there in like 45 minutes. But you can pretty much do stuff online now. And if you do it at a certain time of day, get what you need, within 24 hours. So unless it's an absolute rush job where you just have to have the paperwork, like maybe you want to go open up a bank account and you can't open up a bank account unless you have two things. The paperwork, oftentimes certified from the state saying that your entity exists, and the tax ID number from the IRS. If you don't have those two things, you can't open up a bank account. And if you want to go open up a bank account and it's got to happen that day, yeah, maybe you may want to go and form your entity at Preston Street because you can walk out the door with the paperwork versus if you do it online, it may take a day or two. And if you do it online on a Friday, you may not get the paperwork back until Monday or Tuesday. So if you're really pressed for time, then yes, go to Preston Street. But otherwise, just do it online. And some of you are like, well, how do I do it online? That's what I'm going to show you next in the next 5 minutes. I'm going to show you how to actually do it. All right. So does anybody have any questions of me from what I shared with you so far? I'm kind of trying to walk you down a path for a reason, and then we're going to actually roll up our sleeves and do it. Okay. So a question, let me go back and look at some of the questions. Hi, Sherman. Is it good to create an entity as a real estate agent, and which entity is best? So I think I've answered that. Again, I can't tell you what to do because I'm not a lawyer and I don't know your specific circumstance. But what I do when I create entities today is I don't bother forming corporations. I have not formed a corporation in 20 some years. The last corporation I formed was in 1989. How long ago is that? Today versus 1989. What is that? 30 years ago, more or less. Everything I've formed over the past 10, 20 years since I've been a full-time real estate investor since 2001 has been done through LLCs. That's what I use. That's what I do because they just have so much tremendous flexibility, on top of which some of the things that you have to decide for tax purposes, you don't have to decide until it's time to do your taxes. So you can actually form an entity and not worry about a whole lot of like individual stuff until it's time to sit down with your tax person and do your taxes. I see so many people get hung up on, well, what should I call my entity? And should it be an LLC? And, I need to go hire this lawyer and pay them $1,500. Oh my God, no. Are you out of your mind? You can go online and form an LLC in Maryland for like $100, $109. If you need a rush job, need it overnight, pay the service fee, maybe $200. Why in the world it's a fill in the blank exercise. Why in the world you want to go pay some lawyer $1,500? And you don't even know if you even like real estate and you don't even know if you're going to keep that entity. Just do it yourself. My opinion, not my legal opinion. My philosophy is make money first. Get out there and do what you need to do to make some money. And when you make some money, have enough money to go see the lawyer and say, hey, did I do it correctly? And if you didn't, let them fix it. That's the great thing about entities. If you blew it, create another one. It's not a big deal. And you're going to create multiple entities if you're going to be wholesaling real estate, because that's one of the techniques that we're going to be talking about in depth next week as to how you use entities as a way to facilitate wholesaling your deals. But you can do this yourself. I created my first corporation myself. There was a guy, I can't remember his name. He wrote a book and it was called How to Incorporate in Delaware for $50. And I used the book and the forms in the book to incorporate, but instead of doing it in Delaware, I did it in Maryland. That was when I was a sophomore at Towson University in 2002. I created my first entity from my dorm room at Towson University. You can do this yourself. You should do this yourself as far as I'm concerned. And then once you start making money, go very quickly, go see a lawyer and say, where did I screw up and help me fix it? But you go create 2 or 3 entities because you need them and you got a lawyer who's charging you $1,500 and you're out $4,500 before you make your first nickel? In what universe does that make sense? I'm just saying. I know I'm going to get in trouble now. All the lawyers in the group are saying, you shouldn't tell them they should do this themselves. They might hurt themselves. Yeah, whatever. All right, so everybody, is everybody with me? There's C Corps. C Corps can file with the IRS to become S Corps. There's limited partnerships, but the limited partners can't be involved in the day-to-day affairs of the business. And then there's LLCs, limited liability companies. And an LLC gives you the flexibility of both S Corp, C Corp, and LLP. It's the best of all worlds. Now, let's talk about how we actually get her done, right? It's not enough to talk about, let's actually talk about setting up our entity. So let me ask a question. Is there anybody going through the training? Is there anybody who's here today who does not have a corporation or an LLC from which to do business? If you don't have one, say me, I don't have one. Say me, I don't have one. Somebody say me, I don't have one. Me. All right, me. Several of you, okay. All right, so who should I pick on tonight? Let me ask this question. I see Daria, I see Mark, I see Ulysses, I see Robert Eugene, I see Frank. Of you guys who responded, do you have a name in mind for your real estate entity? Do you have a name in mind? If you do, say yes. If you have one, yes. Okay, Ulysses was first. Okay, what name do you have in mind, Ulysses? Ulysses, what name do you have in mind? Type it in. What name do you want to call your real estate company, Ulysses? All right, Ulysses is not responding. Robert, what do you want to call your real estate company? Okay, Robert's not responding. Frank, I'm just working through the list, folks. Frank, what do you want to go? AVA Homes. Great, thank you, Frank. You win the prize. Too late, Ulysses. Frank beat you to the punch. All right, so let's go through and let's form an entity in Maryland. But before I do that, I want to share a couple things with you. Number one, in my opinion, not as a lawyer, you want to form your entity in the state where you intend to do business. So if you live in Virginia, but you plan on doing business in Maryland, you should form a Maryland entity. If you live in DC, but you plan on doing business in Maryland, you should form a Maryland entity. Here's why. Entities are created at the state level, and I hope you guys are writing this down because I don't have a slide for this. I'm just telling you how it works. Entities are created at the state level. Therefore, they're recognized at the state level. If I have a Virginia entity and I want to do business in Maryland, the state of Maryland is going to require me to register to do business in the state of Maryland. And that specific designation, that specific task is what's known as registering as a foreign entity. A foreign entity, I'm in the United States of America, ain't no foreign entity. Well, in the eyes of the state of Maryland, you are. And the formality and the process is filing as a foreign entity is almost identical as just creating the entity in Maryland in the first place. So if you form it in Virginia, and then you want to come do business in Maryland, Maryland's going to say, okay, I don't care what you paid Virginia, you got to pay me the same thing as if you were filing here in Maryland. That's number one. And some of you are thinking, well, what if I just don't? What if I just bypass? Who's going to know anyway? If nobody tells on me, who'll know? Well, let's say you wind up doing business and the deal blows up. And the deal blows up not because of something you did, but because of something somebody else did. And it blows up in such a way that you're really hopping mad and you decide to go see a lawyer and sue that person. And the lawyer listens to your story and goes, oh man. And then they did what? Really? Seriously? Oh yeah, we gonna sue them for 9 Sundays. What's the name of the entity? You give them the name of the entity. He said, I don't see it. I don't see it in the SDAT database. You're like, what's that? SDAT, State Department of Assessment Taxation. I don't see the name of your entity in the SDAT database. What's the name again? You give it. Yeah, I don't see it. Are you sure? Are you sure that's the name of your entity? Of course I'm sure. It's my entity. Then why is it in the SDAT database? Well, what's the SDAT? It's the database of Maryland. Oh, I'm not a Maryland company. I'm a Virginia company. And the lawyer's going to say, get the hell out of my office. You were doing business in Maryland as a Virginia entity, knowing full well that you had to register in Maryland. Well, I didn't know because I did it on my own and nobody told me. Well, Sherman's telling you right now. Dude, you can't sue in Maryland with a Virginia entity unless the Virginia entity has first filed as a foreign entity and you had no right to transact business in the state in the first place. Why'd you come in here as a Virginia entity and not file as a foreign entity? I know. Well, you can't use that one because I just told you. If you decide to sue somebody because of a deal you got into in a state that you didn't file your proper paperwork, you have no standing. And it's not going to go anywhere. And there's no lawyer in his right mind or her right mind is going to take that case. Got it? In the eyes of the state of Maryland, you don't exist if you're a Virginia corporation. Not unless you file as a foreign entity, which basically says, I'm here to do business in your state, Maryland. And the state goes, okay, now that you have filed as a foreign entity and you've gotten your certs, you are free to do business in our state. We know who you are, do your thing. If you don't take that step, you're not allowed to do business in the state. That's number one. Number two, let's change the fact pattern a little bit. Let's say that you did something you weren't supposed to do. And now somebody's coming after you. And you now go see the lawyer, go, am I okay? Am I okay? And the lawyer goes, look, don't worry about it. You got are you in good standing? Yes. You file your documents? Yes. Don't worry about it. The worst thing they could do is get a lien or an injunction or judgment against us, but we'll just put your entity in bankruptcy. We'll just shoot it. It's a clone. Get rid of it. You'll be fine. Now, what's the name of your entity? Yada, yada, yada. I don't see it. What's the name of your entity? Yada, yada, yada. I don't see it. I don't see your entity in the State Department Assessment Taxation database. What's that? It's a database of entities in Maryland. Oh, it's a Virginia entity. Well, did you file as a foreign entity? No. Dude, you came into Maryland with a Virginia entity and you didn't file? You have no protection. As far as the state's concerned, you are acting as a sole proprietor. You can't use your shield from Virginia to protect you in Maryland. Here, let me give you something. What's that? The name of another lawyer, because they're going to take everything you got. You acted in a manner that you're kind of liable and you don't have an entity to protect you. You acted as a sole proprietor as far as Maryland concerns when you crossed the line and didn't file the proper paperwork. Are you sure? Dude, get out of my office. I don't even want to talk to you. Because if it looks like they're coming after you as a sole proprietor, I'm not prepared to defend you. You really want to have that conversation at some point in time in the future? But Sherman, I went to this boot camp and the guru said I should use a Wyoming corporation because Wyoming's the place to incorporate. Great, use your Wyoming corporation. Pay the guru $1,200. Pay whoever got your Wyoming corporation their annual fee, whatever, but still make sure that your Wyoming corporation files as a foreign entity if you plan on doing business in Maryland. Because to do so without that, you're acting as a sole proprietor. And as such, you have no protection. That's number one. Number two is even worse. Like, Sherman, how could it possibly get worse? When it comes to real estate, there is a Maryland law. And yes, the out-of-town gurus do not know this law the way we know this law who do business in Maryland. The law basically says, it's a law for title companies, not us entrepreneurs. So many of us don't know it. But the law basically says that if a transaction goes through in Maryland and the entity that is a part of the transaction is a foreign entity, the settlement company must withhold 6% of the total value of the transaction until such time as the entity presents its tax returns, which could be up to a year later or more. 6% of like on a $100,000 transaction, that's $6,000. That could be a significant part of your profit if you're a wholesaler. You really want your wholesale profits sitting in an escrow account for a year until you prepare your tax returns. And if you're late on preparing your tax returns, or you prepare your tax returns in October, not April, you really want to be waiting around for your money for up to another year? If you don't come into Maryland using a foreign entity. Don't come into Maryland using a Wyoming Corp or Nevada Corp or Delaware Corp or Virginia Corp or DC Corp and file as a foreign entity, because when you get to the settlement table, they're going to sit on your money for a year. How do you avoid that? Don't be a foreign entity. File an entity status in Maryland. Well, can I, as a Virginia resident, own a Maryland LLC? Of course you can. Can I, as a DC resident, own a Maryland LLC? Of course you can. You can own multiple LLCs. In my opinion, and what I do, since I'm doing deals predominantly in Maryland, is I form Maryland LLCs. Now, here's the other great thing about Maryland. In Maryland and everywhere else, when you form an LLC, you're going to have to designate what's called a registered agent or a resident agent. Every state uses different terminology. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Every state uses one or the other terminology. I don't think there's a third name. Resident agent and registered agent mean the same thing. Your ability to form a clone, your ability to do business in a state is granted by the state. And what the state says is, look, we want you to pay the fees, fill out the appropriate paperwork, and we want you to have somebody here in our state that if we ever have to get a hold of you and traditional means of communication don't work, we're not going to come talk to you. We're going to talk to your registered or resident agent. So as an example, you're in Virginia. You form a Maryland entity, a Maryland LLC in this example. And your mailing address is Virginia. All your mail is going to Virginia. All the correspondence is going to Virginia. But if and on that day that the state sends you something to say, hey, listen, you haven't filed your annual renewal and you're about to have your status taken away, and we send it to your Virginia PO box or your Virginia co-work space, and that letter comes back, we want a resident agent, a registered agent, to send that letter out, certified mail, to make sure that that person gets you the information. The sole purpose of a resident or registered agent is to get you communication when it comes from the state if the state can't find you. That's their only function in life. That's the only reason why they exist. But every state mandates that if you form an entity, you got to have a resident or registered agent. So if you're in Virginia, you're in DC, and you decide to set up a Maryland entity, which is a smart move, you have to have a resident or registered agent who is a resident of the state of Maryland. And their sole function in life is if the state ever sends communications to them, they agree to get it to you as expeditiously as possible. Got it? They agree to make the effort. If they can't find you, so then they send it back to the state, say, we can't find them. in which case your charter is revoked and you're no longer allowed to do business. But if it gets that bad, you know, you're gone anyway and you don't care. But you have to have a resident agent when you first set this thing up. Does everybody understand that? Everybody got it? Everybody got that point? If you do, give me a thumbs up or say I got it in the chat box. Okay. Now, here's the great thing about Maryland, and I can't speak to any other state. Actually, I can't speak to Virginia because my entity is still in Virginia. I do business principally through my S Corp, which is a Virginia S Corp, Virginia Corp. Okay. And then I have LLCs underneath my Corp. Okay. And those LLCs are either owned by me individually or me in partnership with my S Corp. Okay. In Maryland, once you form one Maryland LLC and you have one Maryland resident agent, as long as that entity is in good standing, it can serve as the resident agent for any other LLC that you form. And for the purposes of what we're going to really get into next week, it's kind of nice to know that once you form one LLC and you keep it in good standing, it can act as a resident agent for any other LLC that you form. You don't have to keep on going back to that previous resident agent. Now your LLC can take on resident agent status for any other Maryland LLCs that you form. All right, has everybody got that? If you got it, say got it, or give me a quick thumbs up. Okay, so getting back to who? Was it Frank? Yes, Frank wants to register the company called AVA Homes. So let's take a look at it. What are the steps in the process for setting up our entity? It's a 3-step process. And as you can see, this is your homework. So I'm going to demonstrate it, registering an entity for Frank, but every person who does not have an entity, this is what you're going to do for your homework tonight. Okay? And because tomorrow is my open office hours day. In other words, there's not going to be a lesson tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm just going to come on at 7 o'clock and just answer questions. If your schedule is such that you can't do this tonight, then do it tomorrow. You're doing it online, it doesn't matter. You're not physically going to Preston Street, you're going to do this online. So number one, if you are an investor who intends on doing business in Maryland, you need a Maryland entity, in my opinion. That's not a legal opinion, that's a business based on experience. That's your professor talking. If no other reason, you don't want to get to the settlement table on a deal and be told that they're withholding 6% of the transaction and that's all your profit and you don't get it until you file your tax returns the following year. If no other reason, and it just, to me, it just doesn't make sense to come in as a foreign entity. And by the way, even if you come in as a foreign entity, even if you spent all that money to form a Wyoming corporation, you come into Maryland as a foreign entity, register as a foreign entity, they're still going to withhold your money. So sooner or later, you're going to have to form, in my opinion, sooner or later, you should want to form a Maryland entity so you can get all your money at the settlement table. So what I'm going to demonstrate for you right now is using Frank's desire to have a company called AVA Company. Is it AVA Company? Let me look at that again. Sorry. AVA Homes. Using his desire to use AVA Homes, I'm going to go ahead and go through the process and let you watch me go through the process. It's being recorded into our Facebook group, and then you can come back and watch this portion of the video and do this for yourselves, for those of you who need to form a Maryland entity. So here's the steps in the process, and I'm going to go through it on the homework sheet, step by step, and then you guys are going to do it as homework, those of you who need to form an entity. And those of you, as I go through this, go, gee, I didn't do that when I formed my entity. You may want to redo this anyway and set yourself up a Maryland entity. Got it? All right. Step one, we want to determine the name of our entity, and we also need to determine who will serve as our resident agent. So that's the first step in the process. So Frank says he wants to use AVA Homes, H-O-M-E-S. And that's the name. So it would be AVA Homes LLC, AVA Homes L.C, okay? AVA Homes, comma, LLC. Those are his 3 choices, okay? As a part of step 1, we also need to determine who will serve as our resident agent. Now, here's the deal. In Maryland, either a flesh and blood human being who lives in the state and is a resident of the state, they don't have to own their own home, but they at least have to have a Maryland address, can in fact serve as the resident agent. And in Maryland, a Maryland entity, LLC, Corp, LLP, that is in good standing. What does it mean to be in good standing? You've paid all the fees, you filed all the reports. When you create an entity in Maryland, you pay a fee, you fill out the paperwork. You are automatically in good standing for the first year. When your 1-year renewal comes up, you have to fill out an annual report and pay a fee. If you don't fill out the annual report and pay the fee, at some point in time in the future, you will no longer be in good standing. If you let that happen, I think more than a year or two, you wind up forfeiting your right to run your entity. Now, the good news is you can make it up, and you may have to pay a fine. And if you forfeit your entity, you can revive your entity, but that too oftentimes has a fine. Okay, and it's just a matter of making up past years' back payments. But you do want to make sure that you're in good standing when you are doing business. If you do business and you're not in good standing, you lose your protections. If you form a joint venture or you enter into a contract and you knew at the time you entered into the contract that you weren't in good standing, you could be accused of fraud. And if you let your entity go into forfeiture, you're out there operating as a sole proprietor. If you knew, it's not a matter of no, the legal definition is know or should have known. In other words, you know you haven't paid your annual dues, you know that you were not in good standing, you didn't do anything about it, and then your status got forfeited, and you're out there still doing business with business cards that say the name of your entity and your title on it. Somebody could accuse you and could prove that you were committing fraud because you knew for a fact you weren't in good standing and that your status had been forfeited or revoked. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're doing this stuff properly. Got it? But the first year that you're in business, there's really nothing due other than the paperwork to form it and the fee you pay to form it. So you're going to be kind of automatically in good standing that first year. Okay, so we need to make sure we got a resident agent. Can be a legal person who lives in Maryland or an entity. My strong suggestion is to never act as your own resident agent using your home address, because everything you do is part of the public record. I used to say ladies don't do this. I say nobody do this. Because if you act as your own resident agent using your own home address, and somebody has your business card or somebody sees your website and they click on the name and address for that resident agent, Siri and Google and whatever the one is, Alexa, will give them drive-by drive directions to your house. I have a mentor, somebody who I admire greatly. He sold his company for multiple millions of dollars. And then he decided after he was in retirement for a few years to get back in the consulting practice. And he formed an entity and used his home address. I'm like, Bill, do you realize that your home pops up when I Google the name of your company? And I'm looking at your house right now using Google Earth. Do you really want people to be able to get drive-by drive directions to your house? I said, I didn't realize it. I don't want you guys making that same mistake. So you should not use your own name and your own personal address for your resident agent. Well, if I don't do that, what can I use? Well, if you have a relative, if you have a friend, and they're willing to be your resident agent and they live in the state of Maryland, fine. But understand, Google and Siri and Alexa will give them drive-by drive directions to their house. So you wind up using your mama and you're okay with somebody who's mad at you driving to your mom's house looking for you, by all means. My suggestion, use a Maryland entity. There are companies that provide resident or registered agent services. We at Real Investors have set up a company specifically for our members to provide that service. It's called Suite 105. In fact, it's called suite105.com LLC. It is a Maryland entity that is in good standing, and therefore it can act as a resident agent, and we allow people who are affiliated with Real Investors and people who are not affiliated with Real Investors. If you pay the fee, It's an annual fee. You pay the annual fee, and you just go to suite105.com LLC. Sorry, no, you go to suite105.com. LLC is not in the name of the domain name, but you go to suite, and I'm putting it in the chat box right now. www.suite105.com. Okay, go there, and for $150, we will act as your resident agent. How's that work? Go there, put your credit card in. After it processes it, you'll get a page that says, congratulations, please don't close this window. Please don't close that window. And there is a 2-page contract that you fill out. The signatures are actually on the 3rd page, but it's just signatures. It's a 2-page contract. Read it, fill it out, sign it, get it back to Lisa. You can either fax it to her or scan it and email to her. Her contact info's on there. And once she receives it, any correspondence that comes to our office, she'll match it up with the name of your entity, and we will act as your resident agent. So if you need that service, we provide that service. If you can find a cheaper service, use a cheaper service. It doesn't really matter, but you've got to have somebody acting as your resident or registered agent, and it should never, ever, ever be you using your home address. And I've had people say to me, well, Sherman, I did that and I didn't know this. Is there any way that I can fix it? Yes and no. You can go back to the state and say, hey, listen, don't use me and my home address anymore. But everything you tell the state is public information, and I can Google it. So even if you change the resident agent and the resident agent address, the original name and address will always be a part of that public record. You can't make that go away. So just don't do it. So either use family, friend, service you find off the internet, use us, doesn't matter who you use, but you've got to designate somebody as your resident agent, and whoever you designate, that information will be in the public record forever. So choose wisely, okay? Question came in, Sherman, when using a resident agent like Suite 105 for LLC, does service of process flow to Suite 105 when LLC is used? So yes, again, the whole purpose of resident agent, and the only thing the resident agent is agreeing to do, is if the state wants to get a hold of you, the resident agent, whoever that is, whoever you pick, agrees to get that information to you. That's the very definition of what a resident or registered agent. And again, some states call it resident agent, some states call it registered agent. It doesn't matter what they call it, the function is the same. That person, that individual, that company is agreeing that if the state should ever reach out and touch them, trying to get a hold of you, that whatever they get, they'll pass it on to you. The way that kind of works, because we've done this before, you set up a company, you get yourself a PO box, or you get yourself a box at the UPS store. 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year goes by, and you're like, I'm not really doing this anymore. You don't renew at the UPS store. You don't renew. The state's now saying, okay, we're getting ready to terminate your status. And they send a certified letter to the UPS store, and the UPS store sends it right back and says, he ain't here, he didn't pay his bill. The state then takes whatever they sent you and they send it to the resident agent. And the resident agent's job is to make best efforts to get it to you. And if you haven't paid the resident agent bill, the resident agent sends it back and goes, well, he's not here either. At which point they're definitely going to terminate your entity. You're good as toast. You're good as done. Okay. Somebody says, I went through Legal Shield to register my LLC, use Suite 105 as my resident agent. When I went in on the MD-STAT site, I noticed that although they use the resident agent Maryland address, they have my name on the document. Yes, they screwed up. Here's the deal, and I learned this one the hard way. You got to double check your lawyers. Lawyers are not infallible. I learned this the hard way. My very first government contract wound up becoming a lawsuit. Why? Because my lawyer wrote something in my contract, my subcontractor, which was not accurate. And my subcontractor, who had a history of suing people, which I didn't know till later, saw that and took full advantage. And $200,000 in legal fees later, the judge goes, yeah, Sherman, you're right. And the guy who's suing you is wrong, or more accurately, your company is right, and the company that's suing you is wrong, but it's still a $200,000 legal bill. but the lawyer was the one that screwed it up in the first place because he wrote something that he shouldn't have written. So just because your lawyer gives you a document doesn't make it right. You got to look at it before you turn it in. But as far as I'm concerned, do it yourself and save the money. And then when you are making some money, then go back to the lawyer and say, hey, listen, this is what I did. How badly did I screw it up? And now I have the money to pay you. Can you fix it? But don't just simply trust that you give something to a lawyer, they're going to do it right. They're not. Because the lawyer's not you, and they don't care about your business the way you do. That's what it means to be an entrepreneur. You care more about this thing than anybody else in the world. And no lawyer is going to care as much about your business as you are. So yeah, they screw things up. And unfortunately, you got to live with it because there's nothing you can do about it. You can't change. It will still be in the public record. Okay. Somebody said, if you set up an LLC through a bank, does it? No, you don't set up LLCs through the bank. You set up LLCs through the state. LLCs and other entities, LLCs, C Corps, S Corps, LLPs are chartered by the state. You do it through the state. Now the bank is going to want to see your paperwork to allow you to open up an account. They're going to want to see both your articles of organization or articles of incorporation, and articles of organization go with LLCs, articles of incorporation go with corporations. They both basically are fundamentally the same thing. A lawyer will tell you they're not, but when you press a lawyer and say, well, wait a minute, don't they kind of do the same thing? They're like, yeah, they kind of do. So they're fundamentally the same thing. They are the articles that you present to the state that allows you to form your entity and allows for your entity to exist. The bank is going to want to see those articles. They may also want to see the document that says how you're going to manage it. And I'm having a senior moment, forgive me. So when you form an LLC, you have articles of organization, and then you also have the operating agreement. And it's the operating agreement that specifies who's doing what and what the ownership is. The operating agreement is not filed with the state. The operating agreement on an LLC is not filed with the state. And it's inside the operating agreement that says who owns what. The banker may want to see that, but the state doesn't care. Look, at the end of the day, the state doesn't care who owns it, how you do it, what you do, blah, blah, blah. All they care is that they got their fee. As long as you pay the fee and fill out that one piece of paper, you're good to go. But they don't care who owns it. So it's the articles of organization that forms it. And in the state of Maryland, that's a one-pager, about 8 blanks. Nowhere in there does it ask who actually owns the sucker. That's what's in your operating agreement that specifies what the percentage of ownership is. The bank is going to want to see either articles of organization. Some banks want to see operating agreement, but not all. Some banks are going to see a certificate of good standing if the entity's been in business for a while. But if the business is brand new, oftentimes the banker don't want to see that. And the bankers want to see your tax ID number or your EIN, and that comes from the federal government. That's what you go online to irs.gov and create something called SS4. But we're going to do that. Let's do it. All right. So questions. Let me answer a couple more questions, and let's get to it, because poor Frank's like, Sherman, I thought you said you're going to form my entity. All right. Whoa. Y'all got lots of questions. All right. Can I start as an LLC but later place it under an S corp? No. LLCs are not corps. LLC, limited liability company. It's like saying, Sherman, can I have a son? And then later on, no, I don't even go there. No, you can't do that. If you form a corp, you form a corp. If you form an LLP, you form an LLP. If you form an LLC, you form an LLC. An LLC can never become a corp, and a corp can never become an LLC unless you put one out of business. You file what's known at the state as articles of dissolution that puts your entity out of business, and then form a new one on the same day. And maybe you can use the same name, maybe you can't. So I have Trade Winds International Inc. And if I decided to dissolve it and form an LLC, then I could go back to the state. So I'm dissolving the Inc. and I'm forming the LLC. But you cannot turn an LLC into a corp, and you can't turn a corp into an LLC. All right. Does the state of Maryland notify you at the year's end to file the reports and pay the fees? They used to, but they don't do it anymore. You just kind of know you're supposed to be doing it. And those of us who have been at it for a while kind of know we got up until April, and if we go past April, then we're no longer going to be in good standing. So you have sort of a little window. Every state's a little bit different. Do you have the service for other states? No, unfortunately, we do not offer resident agent services in other states because we don't have office space in other states. And the first fundamental rule of being a resident agent is you must have a physical location within the state. So we can't operate and offer resident agent services for DC because we don't have a physical presence in DC or Virginia anymore. If you set up an LLC, okay, we already talked about that. Is your LLC beneficiary public record? Okay, when you do an LLC, there is no beneficiary. The term beneficiary applies to trust. So in trust lingo, when you form a trust, which is done with your lawyer and it's never registered at the state, the trust will have a trustee who's responsible for the trust, and the trust will have beneficiaries or beneficiary. So one or more beneficiaries. And the beneficiaries are the ones who get the benefit for which the trust. So I buy a house and I put it in a trust or buy it in a trust, then the trustee is responsible for administering the trust, and whoever winds up getting the benefit of the house, living in the house, et cetera, or getting the proceeds if the house gets sold, is the beneficiary, okay? LLCs don't have beneficiaries. LLCs don't have trustees. Trusts have trustees, trusts have beneficiaries. LLCs have members. And so when you form an LLC, you can either designate that everybody's a member, or you can designate that everybody's a member except one person is designated as the managing member. LLCs, you can also designate more than one person. The managing member is the person who's by and large responsible for the day-to-day affairs. And the managing member can be a corporation. It can be an entity as opposed to being an individual, okay? But LLCs have members, corporations have stockholders, unless it's a not-for-profit, but we're not gonna get into that. That's another lesson for another day, okay? All right. To remedy the error of legal shield with my name of the document, can I kill the LLC and create another? Yes, Shiva, if it bothers you enough that your name is in there and you don't want your name or your address. Now look, the other option is just move. If you move, then whoever comes to that old address, they're not going to find you anyway. They'll find whoever's there, and depending upon the nature of why they came there, that could be a problem for them. But if it bothers you that your name's in the public record, then the only real option is to close down that LLC, create a new LLC with a different resident agent, and I would strongly recommend that you use a totally different name. Because let's say, for example, the name of your entity was Shiva Real Estate LLC, and you're mad because your name's attached to it, and you shut it down, and then you create a new one, and you call it Shiva 2 LLC. Well, guess what? When somebody does a search on SDAT, Shiva 1 LLC is going to show up, so is Shiva 2. And somebody can pretty much figure out, oh, you shut this one down on the same day that you created the new one. They could kind of put 2 and 2 together. Now, having said that, if you use a resident agent services, on the new one, it's not going to have your personal name or your personal address. Can I place an LLC under the umbrella of an S Corp? Yes, you can. S Corps can own LLCs, but LLCs cannot own S Corps. S Corps can only be owned by individuals, but entities can be members of LLCs. My LLC has me and my home address as my resident agent, so should I form a new one? Again, if you're okay with an LLC that has your name and your address, and you're okay with total strangers being able to get drive-by-drive directions from Siri, Alexa, and Google, and that one person who is kind of creepy, and they go online, see your website, see your name, see your business, and Google and get drive-by-drive directions and show up at your house at an hour that like you weren't expecting them. If you're okay with that, then leave it alone. If you're not okay with that, unfortunately, the only way you're going to be able to rectify it is to create a new entity and have somebody that's totally unrelated to you, someone with a totally unrelated address as your resident agent. And if you would like for Suite 105 to act in that capacity, I'm sure for the $150 fee, which is what it is right now. So if somebody winds up watching this recording 2-3 years from now and the price goes up, whatever. But it's been that price for a number of years, so I don't think it'll go up. And that's very much comparable to what other resident agent services charge. Okay. All right. So Joe, you and I got to talk, and you shouldn't even be putting that out for everybody. I'm gonna have to hurt you. All right, so back to Frank's like, did you forget about me? No, I did not forget about you. So Frank wanted us to register an entity, and what was it called? AVA Homes, AVA Homes. All right, AVA Homes. So let's talk about how we do that. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen for a second, and I'm going to start sharing this. All right, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type in MD. As you can see, like I've typed it in so many times, it's like right there, MD SDAT. All right. And when I go to Maryland State Department of Taxation, MDSDAT, one of the things that's interesting that comes up over here is that little Google box. And you can actually see the building on Preston Street, 201 Preston, although it's not 201, it's this one over here, which I think is 301. This is the, so if you actually ever do go physically to Preston Street, this is the building that you will go to right here. I think it's up on the 8th floor to file your LLCs. But what I'm going to show you how to do is how to actually do it online. So you don't have to go there. All right. So I come over here and I see SDAT, and I see that SDAT is responsible for business searches and also responsible for real property searches. Next week, we'll get into how to use SDAT to see records of who owns property. But for today's purposes, we're going to do a business search. And I'm going to come here. I see something like this, and I'm going to click on Business Entity Search. Everybody see Business Entity Search? Y'all see that? Do I need to blow that up? And blow it up. All right, see that? Business Entity Search, yes. So I'm going to click on Business Entity Search, and I'm going to type in the business name. So the first step in the process is to see if the name's available. And so Frank wanted AVA Homes. I'm going to type in AVA Homes. And what I will see is it's available, because it says the business name you entered was not found, meaning nobody's using it. So I'm like, okay, great. And I want to make sure I'm searching business name, not department ID. Every business that's formed has its own individual ID. That's the state designation. I want to make sure I'm searching under name. So AVA Homes is not used. So good news. Now, here's what I do. You don't have to do it, but I do it. I would recommend that you also search and see if the domain name is available, the .com, because if you form a company, especially if it's your quote unquote operating company, you probably want to have some kind of a web presence, and you kind of want to make sure that you can get the domain name. So we're not going to do that right now. We're just going to go straight to registering the name. So I'm going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to say, what am I looking for? What am I looking for? What are you looking for, Sherman? We're looking to form the company. I'm having a senior moment. Where do we go? Oh, business is new. For forms, business is new. All right, see how we got there? All right, so I go to forms, business is new. Hello, hello. Oh, duh. All right, let me try this one more time, because I'm going to show you where we came from and show you where we're going to. So we started off at the search. We did the search. We found out that it was available. And we want to go, here's where we go. Maryland Business Express. This is how you do it now in Maryland. You click Maryland Business Express, and it takes you to a different website. And you say, hey, I want to start my business. I want to register my business. So I click on register the business. And I want to register my business now. Okay. Now I already have an account on the website. If you don't have an account, you got to register a username and create an account. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Hey, it actually works. And I want to register the business. And the business I want to register, those are my existing businesses, so I don't want to do those. It's going to make me search the name again. So I have to come over here and search the name again. And it was AVA Homes, Homes. And it doesn't exist. Oh, I'm sorry, we already did it. It doesn't exist. So I'm going to say, so I'm going to come over here and say, start a new filing. I'm going to file for a new business. I'm going to register a business. Sorry, guys. It's not really this complicated, but I'm kind of used to doing it the old way. So I hit register a new business. And I get to pick. Do I want a sole proprietorship? Do I want a sole proprietorship, guys? No. General partnership? No. I want a Maryland limited liability company. Notice they all say Maryland, Maryland, Maryland. Why? Because Maryland charters Maryland businesses. Maryland doesn't charter Virginia businesses or DC businesses. So I pick Maryland limited liability company. And I want to use the online forms. It does allow you to upload, like if you had spent money on a lawyer and a lawyer gave the documents, you'd upload. But again, Maryland makes it so simple, you can actually do it online. So business name, what business name do I want? I want AVA Homes. And then it says, okay, what do you want for the suffix? In other words, do you want limited liability, comma, limit, do you want it Maryland, AVA Homes, limited liability company, AVA Homes, comma, limited liability company, AVA Homes, comma, L period C, AVA Homes, comma, LLC, AVA Homes. And like I can pick any of the ones I want. But whatever I pick, that's what I gotta live with. Frank, where are you, man? What do you want? Which of these do you want? Frank, you there? I'm not seeing you. For some reason, I've lost my chat box. Let me go ahead and stop sharing. Stop sharing for a second so I can get to the chat. And there's the chat. There's the chat. So Frank says he wants comma LLC. Thank you, Frank. So we go back to that particular screen. And I'm going to pick AVA Homes, comma LLC. Got it? Okay, now that I got it, what's it asking me to do? Search name again? Yeah, search name. Come on now. It says, hey, look, you're good to go because it's available. So first question, what's my address? The address of the principal physical office located in Maryland. Frank. Frank, do you have, you know what, I'm going to actually, Frank, for the purposes of this, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. Where are you, Frank? Oh, there you are. Frank.
Right here.
All right. So it's probably easier if we just talk it through,
Okay.
as opposed to using the chat for this exercise. So let me go back to sharing my screen. So first question, do you have an existing Maryland LLC, or all right, do you have family, friends that live in Maryland?
I have some. I actually was going to use the 105 though, but I guess for the purpose of this, I got to come up with the address.
You got to come up with something. So if you are going to use 105, I'm going to go ahead and go forward with this.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure that sometime in the next day or so that you actually go to Suite 105.
Okay.
When you go there, go to www.suite105.com. Go there. You pay. It's just a simple order form. Well, let me show you. Let me actually show you that.
Okay.
I'm showing you this. I might as well show you that too. So let's say share screen. I'm going to go here. I'm going to open a new tab. No, I'm just going to go ahead and that and say suite105.com. Frank, see the screen okay?
Yes.
So that's what you'll see.
Okay.
Realinvestors logo, name, address. Now for this address, you can use your home, use whatever your credit card is.
Okay.
This is not going to go to the state, so go ahead and use whatever your credit card, use your home address, whatever. Then
Okay.
you pay the $150, click the green button that says, yes, I need a Maryland resident agent. When you click it,
Mm-hmm.
a screen will pop up and it'll say, don't close this window.
Okay.
And on that screen, it'll say, download the PDF. It's a 3-page PDF. Technically, it's only 2 pages of document. The 3rd page is for signatures. Download it, print it out, fill it out, and either email it to Lisa or fax it to Lisa. The fax and email are on the form. And just make sure that she gets it in the next day or so. Because what's going to happen is when your documents come from the state to that address,
Mhm.
if you don't have that filled out, then Lisa's going to say, well, we don't know this entity, it's not here, and send it back to the state.
Right. I
So you
understand.
got, so you got about a 72-hour window to get it in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put in 16,000 Trade Zone Avenue. It's already populated. I'm going to put your email. So what email and what address do you want? Because it's your contact info, not my contact info.
Well, frank@kw.com for now.
So
Yep.
FRANK at KW.com.
kw.com.
Okay. And what phone number do you want to use?
240
Mm-hmm.
472
Mm-hmm.
9008.
Okay. So I got that filled out. And it says, in order to operate in Maryland, will the registered entity require a business or industry license as issued by the state? And you don't need a license. You're forming an LLC. Your LLC is gonna own property, or your LLC is gonna be doing services, but you don't need any kind of a special designation to do that. Okay. Your entity is separate from you. Your entity is separate from you as a real estate agent. So your entity is not going to hold your real estate license. Okay. So we say no, then we click continue. And I forgot to tell the county. So we want to make sure we pick Prince George's County. Okay. It continued.
Okay.
So next thing it says is resident agent is a Maryland LLC, because that's what Suite 105 is. Okay.
Okay.
The corporation name.
But
So this is going to be Suite 105 LLC. Okay. So that's not the name of your entity. That's the name of the resident agent.
Resident agent.
All right. Then it wants to say specify the name of the individual within. Now this is you. Okay. So your title is going to be, it can be officer, director, whatever you want. What do you want to call yourself?
Whatever is normal. I mean, what you would recommend on that, that's fine.
Okay, I'd say director.
Okay.
I am so sorry.
No.
This is going to be the contact information. This whole section is about resident agent.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So this is going to be agent. It's going to be Lisa Wicks, because Lisa takes care of everything related to Suite 105. It's going to be the phone number and address for real investors. So 301-218-4333. It's going to be L Wicks at Real Investors. Oops, man, fat fingers. L Wicks at realinvestors.com. And it wants me to retype it. L Wicks at Real. And again, when you print that form, all this info, all our contact.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay.
Okay, whoever has their microphone unmuted, please mute yourself. I don't want to have to mute everybody, because then I can't talk to Frank. All right, contact address for resident agent is 16000. And again, this is on the form, Trade Zone Avenue. And it's Suite 105, Upper Marlboro, Maryland 20774. Okay. Again, it's all on that documentation.
Okay.
Save and continue. Okay. So look, it gives us a little checkbox that says where we have the business information, business name, business information, resident agent, right? And again, you can use either 16,000 Trade Zone Avenue for the business information, or you can use whatever address you want to use. It wants to know for the resident agent, however, that it's a Maryland address. Okay. So Frank, would you prefer to use your own address? Understand that if you give it out now, it's all over the internet forever. And if we keep it,
I'll stick with using the resident agent if that's fine.
All right. So if we do that, then you can always go back to the state and fix that and give it whatever address you want. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Then the next it says, okay, is there an alternative contact? Well, it's optional. No, there is no alternative contact.
Okay.
But if you do specify an alternative contact, then you got to fill all this out. We don't need to fill it out because there is no alternative contact.
Okay.
All right. The next, it gives you a preview of what it looks like. So it's AVA Homes. I don't think it matters whether it's lowercase or uppercase, but I know you wanted uppercase. So let me go ahead and make that change now. AVA, capital HOMES. Okay. And once again, it wants to search just to make sure that's available. It's available. All right, so there you go, AVA Homes.
Okay.
We got the business address, which is located at Trade Zone. If you want to change it, you know, if you got a UPS store account or a business account or business address, again, I would never use my home address. I would never, because whatever this is, it's going to be in the public record.
All right.
Do you want to keep it as this, or you want to make it something different?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So the mail for you is going to come to the office. Just make sure that you got your agreement in the door. Follow up with Lisa, because when it shows up from the state, she needs to match it up with the list of companies that have used our resident agent service.
Okay.
And then again, you can come back later on and change it if you want. Here's your email. So if they do decide to send an email, which I believe they will do, they're going to contact you directly and your phone number. And again, to the best of your knowledge, you don't need a license, and I think that's true.
Okay.
To open a business, you don't need a license. If you were,
yeah, a restaurant.
Well, more along the lines of like you were doing paving, right? And you needed a contractor's license, right? But for most service businesses, no, you probably don't need any kind of special license to do what you're doing. If for whatever reason your broker said, yeah, I'm okay with you holding your broker's license inside an entity, then that would be, yeah, I'm forming this specifically to hold my real estate agent's license. But that's not the case here. You're just looking to have an entity to buy, sell, fix and flip houses, whatever, right? All right, resident agent, we got that nailed down. Suite 105 LLC, contact person's Lisa, address is here. All right, and then contact information, registered account holder. Now this is me, because I logged into my account to register your entity.
Oh, okay.
Just to demonstrate, when you register yourself, your information will show up.
Okay.
All right. Now, Frank, you want me to go ahead and process this, pay for it, and send you a bill?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. The option would be you could go register that. You could go register an account and do this yourself, and it'll be in your account. If I pay the bill, your stuff's going to be in my account, but I think you can move it over later on.
Okay.
Preference.
All right. That's
You
fine.
want me to pay it and send you the bill?
That's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
because
All
I'm
right. So then
gonna do it anyway.
all right. So I'm gonna hit proceed to certification. Okay. And I'm gonna say I'm the authorized person. I hereby sign these are so I'm gonna sign. I'm gonna go ahead and sign it as me, right? But I'm doing it on your behalf. I'm acting as your agent in this regard. Okay. Filing party. The filing party is Mr. It's me, right? And this is all my contact information. This is all my stuff. Y'all don't want to see that. Forget you saw that. And I'll put in the office phone number there, 4333. Okay. And then my email, blah, 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 blah. All right. And then I check the box to say that everything I've got on here is true. Certify and proceed. Certifying agent. Oh, I forgot to check this box. I got to check that box. Certify, proceed. I just forgot to check a box. All right, there we are. Now, it wants to get paid. So the next option is proceed to payment. Okay, sorry, proceed to payment. There's the bill. $100 to file. $20, $21 if I want a certified copy. Frank, you don't need a certified copy.
Okay.
So I'm taking that out, because once you look, once I press the button and it's processed, anybody who goes in and searches for AVA Homes will see that you're there, and they'll also see that you're in good standing. So I'm taking that out. I'm saving the money. All right. If in fact you were needing this to run to the bank tomorrow to open up a bank account, well, you can't do it tomorrow, but let's say sometime this week, then you might want a certified copy. If you're forming an entity because you have a contract and you were putting you had named this entity in the contract, and now you're ratifying the contract and you're getting ready to go to the title company with the ratified contract and evidence that the LLC has been formed, yes, you may want to spend the extra $50 to get that certified copy. Okay. But otherwise, if it's just a form and entity, you don't need it. Now, here's the challenge. Because I'm doing this online, I have to pay the $50 fee.
Okay.
If I were to actually go to Preston Street and just hand in my paperwork and say, send it to me when you send it to me, I wouldn't have to pay the $50 fee. But if I went to Preston Street and said, yeah, I'm going to wait for a half an hour to get the documents, I still got to pay the fee. So if I want this done in a timely fashion, I got to pay the extra $50.
Okay.
Got it?
All right.
All right. So then I hit make payment. It asked me, you know, do you also need to register your new business? Blah, 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 blah. I don't need them to do that. So I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say, don't ask me again. So no.
Okay.
Make payment. All right. So here we go. Here's the screen to make payment. And it gives me my payment options. And I can do PayPal. I can do credit card, whatever. I'm going to pick credit card. And then I'm going to hit next.
Okay. Yeah.
You want to do PayPal?
Let's see here.
You want to do PayPal? No, don't do that because you're going to have to give me your login information. So let's just do,
okay.
Let's just do credit card. And when the time comes for me to enter my credit card, I'll stop sharing the screen and put in my credit card.
Okay.
Okay. So I hit credit card. I hit next. And then I go ahead and fill in my credit card information. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing the screen because y'all don't need to have my Amex number as much as some of y'all may want it. So let me go ahead. I'm just basically filling in the address that it is related to my Amex card. I'm filling in my phone number. I'm just double checking, making sure it's all correct, and it is all correct. I'm putting in the office phone number because I'm going to show you the receipt, and I want you guys getting my cell phone number. Those of you who need it already have it. Then I'm going to put in my credit card number because that's what it's asking me for right now. So, oh, it's already pre-populated. And then it needs my security code, what I'm putting in right now. And boom. And I'm just double checking it. So we can show screen again. So I'll show screen again. So all my information, you guys see it? All my information has been entered and I hit submit payment. It's being processed. I'm getting nervous now. It shouldn't take this long. Boom.
There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay.
And if you're wondering what's this is the coronavirus notice. So that just keeps on popping. But we're done. How do I know we're done? It says thank you. It wouldn't say thank you if it didn't take my money. Got it?
Okay.
It's done. So now, Frank, because I put your email address, it should be sending the documents to you, even though I did it inside of my account.
Okay.
Got it? And oh, by the way, Frank, you owe me $154.50.
I'll definitely take care of it.
You're like, what? You're like, why? What happened? Well, that $9 fee I told you about is now down to $4.50. I guess somebody passed the law because, you know, all the new laws went into effect in Maryland. Somebody must have passed a law and said, you know what? Why are we paying this company $9 a transaction when all of our transactions in Maryland are being done online now, and they cut their fee in half, right? Or a new contractor got the contract and they agreed to cut the fee in half. So $100 for the articles organization. There it is, ABA Homes. $50 for the expediting fee, which happens when you do it online or you go to Preston Street in person, and the $4.50 convenience fee, which is the fee that goes to the contractor who's running this whole website. This is not officially a part of the state. There's a private contractor who's running it. Got it?
Mm-hmm. Got it.
All right. Now, next thing we need to do. Your LLC documents will show up whenever they show up. If it's a day or two, it'll be a day or two.
Okay.
Probably won't be over the weekend, right? So 2 to 3 business days, unless they're running way behind. But the next thing we got to do is we got to go get a tax ID number. Because at some point, this particular entity we set up, which is going to be your operating entity, you're probably going to want to set up a bank account, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so we need to go get an EIN or employee identification number. To do that, we go to irs.gov, G-O-V, and you'll see this. And it's very confusing and a lot of stuff going on. And every time there's a new administration, that changes. But for the most part, the most frequently asked stuff is right here in these buttons. We're looking to apply for an employer ID number.
Okay.
If you come back 6 months from now and it's not there, it'll be somewhere. And if you don't see it, just search EIN. Just type in EIN.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. and it'll take you to the appropriate section to go get, no thanks, I'm not interested in giving feedback. It'll take you to the appropriate section and say, do you need an EIN or apply for EIN online? And that's what we want to do. So whether you do it through a search capability or you just hit one of the buttons, assuming the button's right online, just click on that. And it says, do you need an EIN? And of course, being a good government site, it gives you all of this, like, why do you need it? Blah, 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 blah. And then the obvious button that you want to push, you're like, where is it? Where is it? Well, there it is right there. Apply for EIN.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to apply for an EIN online. And then it says, once again, well, why do you want it? Why I don't? Yeah, I know I want it. Just show me how to do it. So there it is again. So do you really need to have 3 different layers to just apply? I just want to apply. So it'll apply online now. Because like, if I didn't, and then there you go. It's not available. Your federal tax dollars at work. All right, so here's the deal.
All right.
We will come back either tomorrow or the following day. And Frank, if you're here, remind me that we need to get your EIN number, okay?
Okay, will do.
And this just happens, periodically the IRS and other federal websites are just totally overrun and they just go offline. And you just have to just come back on another day, put it in your notes, in your things to do tomorrow, go get my EIN, okay? Now here's the deal. You don't necessarily need an EIN when you're forming an entity for the purpose of wholesaling. You need an EIN, employee identification number, when you are going in and getting yourself a bank account. Okay, the bank will want to see your EIN. Okay, if you form an entity and you form another entity for the purpose of wholesaling, you can use the EIN from your operating company. You don't have to go get a second EIN.
Good.
Got it? Okay. All right, so at this point, Frank, do you have any questions of me?
I'll just get in touch with Elisa tomorrow.
You just need to fill out the paperwork and send it in.
Okay.
And then just follow up with her, leave a voice message, send her an email, just say, please confirm that you got it. And then she'll call you back if there's anything that she needs to discuss with you.
Oh, okay.
The most important thing is that she has it in her possession and that you paid the $150 fee ahead of the state sending the paperwork. Because if the state sends the paperwork, and it could be 2 days, 5 days, 2 weeks, but if the state sends the paperwork, Barbara has been trained to look first to see, are you on the list? If you're not on the list, Barbara has also been trained to send it back with a note that says, no such business here.
Okay, so
that's not a good look when the state sends your paperwork and then it gets sent back with a big old red magic marker that says, no such business here.
All right. 105.
Well, yeah, go to suite105.com. It's that one-page order form I showed you. You put in your credit card information, hit yes, I need it, resident agent services, and a screen will pop up with a PDF you download the PDF, fill it out, get it back to Lisa. That's all you got to do. Okay? All right. And again, if for whatever reason you decide you want to use a different service, that's cool too. But just make sure that Lisa knows ASAP. I mean, you may go online and find somebody who do it for $99. I mean, no skin off my nose.
Well, I knew ahead. That's what I want to do anyway.
Okay. Well, then all you got to do is fill out the paperwork and get it to her, and you're good to go.
Okay.
All right. So at this point, I'm going to mute you because you're good to go. And anybody else who needs an LLC, just follow the same procedure. Come back, watch the video, and just go through and do the procedure yourself. All right. All right. So next up, I'm going to share the screen, and we're going to finish this off. And then we're going to watch a quick case study, and then you guys are going to go off and do your homework tonight or tomorrow. So determine the name of your entity and who will serve as your resident agent. That's step 1. Step 2, go online and check to see if it's available. That's exactly what we did. We went to the Maryland State Department of Assessment and Taxation. The first thing we did was typed in the name of Frank's entity. No entity popped up, which means nobody else has got it. What if somebody else's name pops up? Then you got to pick an alternative version of the name. Let's say he wanted AVA Homes and AVA Homes was taken. Maybe he decides he's going to be AVA Real Estate. Maybe he decides he's going to be AVA House Buyers. He can still be AVA, but he can't be AVA Homes LLC if there's already an AVA Homes LLC. And you guys saw, as I entered in the information to actually register it, it kept checking before it said, yeah, you're good to go. And as you guys saw, it was a really simple, straightforward process doing it online. I mean, you really got, guys, you really ought to be able to do this in like 5 minutes or less. What happens if I can't decide what I want for my name? Pick a name, any name, and go back and tell the state you want to change it to something else later. But get the entity up and running, because you're not going to do business naked. You're not going to do business without your armor. You're not going to do business as a sole proprietor. Better to do business with a name you don't like and then change it later on, because you can always do that. It's just a matter of filling out a form. Better to do that than to be out there as a sole proprietor. All right, next step. Register with the state. You guys saw how I did it. Very straightforward. Then go to irs.gov and get yourself your EIN. When you go to irs.gov, and again, rather than trying to explain it today, I'll do it either tomorrow or the following day, as long as Frank reminds me. And if and when the IRS website's back up and running, we'll go ahead and do it, and I'll demonstrate how to do it, okay? You only need the EIN to open a bank account, all right? So if we do it today, tomorrow, 2, 3, 4 days from now, he's only gonna need it to go open up that bank account. And truthfully, he doesn't wanna actually go open a bank account until he has the paperwork back from the state. So it's gonna take a day or two to get the paperwork back via email to Frank from the state. So you don't have to do it right away. I just sort of like to get in the mode of do it now. That's a good habit to get into. But if you're ready to do it now, but the government's not ready for you, then you got to do it on another day. So we'll do it on another day. And then finally, I recommend that you go register the domain name, and that when you register a domain name, only register the .com. When you register the domain name, Frank, I wouldn't recommend you don't put LLC in the name. I would just go avahomes.com. If avahomes.com is not available, then go avahomesllc.com. When you register a domain name, you can't use commas and you can't use special characters. So it'll be avahomesllc.com, okay? But I generally recommend go get the domain name on the same day that you register your entity, because sooner or later you're going to want to print up business cards. Sooner or later you're going to want to print up some stationery, even if you just print out the stationery on your home computer. And you want to be able to have a domain name that takes you to a website. Next week, early next week, I'm going to show you how to very quickly, once you have your domain name, put up a website in 2 minutes. Anybody like the idea of putting up a full functional website in 2 minutes? Okay, I'm going to show you how to do that next week. But you got to have a domain. You have to have the domain name to be able to do that. So I recommend get your entity set up, and get the .com. Don't bother with .net. Don't bother with .us, because whatever you tell somebody is your domain name, what are they going to type in on their cell phone, their iPad, or their computer? .com. And what if your business actually blows up really, really big, really well? I mean, what would I look like today if I didn't register realinvestors.com? I just registered realinvestors.net. And I'm out there telling everybody about my business. Okay, come to our meetings, come to our training, blah, 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 blah. And go to realinvestors.net. And what are you guys typing in? .com. And whoever has .com is getting all my business. So I generally recommend don't bother with the .co, the .us, the .net. Only get the .com. And if you can't get the .com, pick another name or pick a variation of the name, okay? You can have, listen, Frank can have AVA Homes LLC with the state, and if he finds out that AVA Homes LLC, avahomes.com is not available, but AVA Home Buyers is, he can always go back to the state and say, hey, I'm AVA Homes LLC, but doing business as DBA, AVA Home Buyers LLC. Nothing wrong with that. That's a piece of paper and a $50 fee, okay? But I would strongly recommend that you go get a .com domain on the same day that you're registering your business, so that you can already start having people come find you. All right, couple of questions, then I'm going to show you the case study. By the way, this is your homework for tonight. Tomorrow, you will not have a homework assignment. Tomorrow is open office hours. We will not have a lecture. I will not have slides. You will not have any homework given to you tomorrow. Tomorrow for you guys is catch-up day. So for whatever reason you can't get this done today or can't get us finished today, then we can talk about it tomorrow. And if you do attempt to do this today or tomorrow, and you hit a stone wall, then bring it to tomorrow's open office hours at 7 o'clock when we get together, and I will endeavor to help you work through wherever you're stuck, okay? As well as any place else that you're stuck. Tomorrow is meant to be sort of a stopgap before we go into the next week, so that if you haven't been able to do all the assignments, that you can do a little catch up. That's what it's designed to do. All right, let me see a couple questions here and then we're going to get out of here. I think I've already read that one. I've already read that one. I've definitely read that one. Is Suite 105 a one-time fee? That's an annual fee. It's not a one-time fee. It's an annual fee. And if you find somebody else who can provide the same service for you at a cheaper price, go for it. I mean, you just need somebody to help you get up and running. And here's the deal. If you register a Maryland LLC using Suite 105, once you are approved by the state for your Maryland LLC, you can use your Maryland LLC as a resident agent for any other LLCs you create. And you don't have to use Suite 105 anymore. You can act as your own, you can use that entity as your first clone to act as a resident agent for any other clones that you create along the way, okay? Sherman, Frank indicated lowercase for the LLC cap. Okay, so and it doesn't really matter. On the state website, when you register, it's going to use all caps, okay? It's not going to use lowercase. As far as how you use it, when you use it for your stationery, et cetera, I don't think it really matters, as long as you have LLC in the name to notify the world and people that you're doing business with that you're doing business through an LLC, okay? And it's very important from that point forward that you use LLC and your title, member, managing director, whatever you want to call yourself, grand potentate, whatever, that you use that with all of your correspondence so that people know they're not doing business with you as a sole proprietor, they're doing business through your LLC and you are acting as an agent, officer, or person in charge of the LLC. All right, under filing party, do you still use the resident agent address and not your own? Or is that the address for login? MJ, I'm not sure I understand the question. When you use the state of Maryland website to start transacting business, it's going to ask you to register as a user. So if your question is me registering as a user, it doesn't really matter what I use. But ultimately, when I start putting in my credit card information, it's going to want to tap the credit card address that's on file. So if you're or with your credit card company. So if you use your home address for your credit card, then at the point in time where you're putting in your credit card, yes, it's going to be your home address, but that's not part of the public record. The only part of the public record is that part that I filled out that you guys saw me fill out when I was on the page registering the entity. So the resident agent information was public record, Lisa's name, Lisa's email address will be public record, Frank's name, Frank's address that he gave, which was 16,000 Trade Zone, will be public record. But the information pertaining to my credit card and the address for my credit card is not a public part of the public record, okay? Some of y'all got jokes. Can I dissolve my old LLC, form a new one, and use the same EIN? No. Can your child use your social security number? I think that's called fraud. The EIN is to the business what your social security number is to you. So no, you may not reuse EINs. The IRS will frown upon that tremendously, and you may get yourself in a world of trouble. That EIN goes with that entity. If you dissolve that entity, that EIN goes away and you get a new EIN number, okay? Are all members of the LLC visible in the articles of organization? No members of the, no, zero, none, nada. No members of the LLC are visible in the articles of organization. The articles of organization only wants to know two things: who's the contact person and who's the resident agent. The contact person does not have to be. I could have very easily put my information in there. I'm not a member of Frank's LLC. Okay, I was just filling it out because I was using my account. Now, we did put his name, we did put his email address, because chances are, very high probability, I'm pretty sure of this, that when this thing is approved, the contractor is going to email the document, not snail mail the document. So therefore, it was kind of important that Frank's email address be included and his phone number if they had any questions. But the physical address we put in was the physical address for Suite 105. Nowhere in there did we put in the names of the members. The names of the members goes in your operating agreement. Nowhere in that process did the state ask for the operating agreement. So the state doesn't even know who owns the LLC. They only know who the contact persons are. many times, like this is what happened to Shiva. Many times when you pay a lawyer to do that, the lawyer uses their name. The lawyer uses their contact information, and you never even see it happen. I strongly advocate and recommend that you do it yourself, especially if you're going to be out there wholesaling properties and using LLCs as a tool, which is what I'm going to start teaching you the day after tomorrow, how to use an LLC as a tool to facilitate a wholesale deal. You need to know how to do this stuff yourself. That's why we're spending so much time on it, okay? But the operating agreement is the document that holds the names of the owners. That never gets uploaded into the state. They never even know, all right? Don't we need articles of incorporation to set up a bank account? Okay, articles of incorporation go with what, people? Corporations. Articles of incorporation go with corporations, okay? When you do an LLC, that was not an article of incorporation. That was the, what, oh my gosh, I'm getting, it's late and I'm getting confused. Articles of organization. LLCs use articles of organization because LLCs are not corporations, they're companies. They're limited liability companies. So when you form a corporation, yes, Mark, when you form a corporation, you will file articles of incorporation. And when you go to the bank, they will want to see your articles of incorporation. When you file an LLC, they're going to want to see your articles of organization. Guess what? That little one page, fill in the blank, that was the articles of organization. When Frank gets his paperwork, and Frank, please bring your paperwork. Well, you know what? You guys are going to form your own LLCs. You're going to see it when you do it yourselves. When you file it, it's going to say, here's the name of the entity. Here's the address of the entity. Here's the contact person for the entity. Here's the name of the resident agent. And that's it. That's all it's going to say. And you're good to go. You want to see an example? Who wants to see an example? Give me a thumbs up. It's going to take me an extra 2 minutes. All right. So let me go to that's that. That's the AT. And MDS that. You guys see this okay? And I go back to business. And I'm going to do business entity search. And I'm going to search for an entity that I formed, or I should say more accurately, my son formed, called Dave and Neil. There it is, popping up, Dave and Neil. And I hit search. And look at it. There's Dave and Neil. And I click Dave and Neil. It's active, ought to be active. It's active, it's in good standing, should be. Why should it be active in good standing? Because we formed it in November. Hadn't even had a 1-year anniversary, right? And I'm going to go ahead and notice up here these tabs, general information. There's the general information. It's active, it's in good standing. And here, like, remember I said, Frank? Huh? Oh,
we can't see your
sorry.
screen.
Sorry. Good grief. I'm moving too fast. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Thank you for saying something. So I'm right back here where I was before. Let me move this. Can I move that? Yeah, I can move that. So move that. I went to SDAT. I typed in the search box, Dave and Neil. I clicked on Dave and Neil. This popped up. Can you guys see this? Thumbs up, you can see this. All right, so see these tabs? Here's the general information. Remember how I said that every entity has its own unique number assigned by the state? That is the state's number. So sometimes when I come back and I'm searching for this entity, if I don't remember what the name was, but I have this, and I'm going to get this when it's approved, I can just type in the department ID, okay? Remember how I said he didn't have to order the certificate of status, he could come back and do it later? There's a tab to order the certificate of status if I want that certified certificate of status. However, when I go to the title company and I say, I'm opening up title work in the name of Dave and Neil LLC, they can go on SDAT and they can see that it's in good standing. In many cases today, people aren't asking for paper. They're just simply going to the SDAT website and going, okay, they're in good standing. Notice it also says this, domestic LLC. What does that mean? It means it's a Maryland entity. It means it's not a foreign entity. It means that the title company is not going to withhold the 6% at the settlement table because it's not a foreign entity. Now, next thing, I got filing history. This shows everything I've filed over the years. This entity was created in November 15th of 2019. So the filing history is very short. Only thing in the filing history is articles of organization. If I click that, what's supposed to happen is up pops, and there it is. And you guys can't see it. So I need to stop sharing. Oh, I love me some Zoom. So here's what just popped up. This is what just popped up. Can you guys see this okay? Give me a thumbs up. Articles of organization. That's what I take to the bank. The undersigned, with intention of creating a Maryland limited liability company, files the following articles of organization. The name of the entity. Where'd that come from? Fill in the blank. The address. Where'd that come from? Fill in the blank. Resident agent. This was created by my son. My son already has a Maryland LLC. He's using his Maryland LLC as a resident agent. Fill in the blank. Whose address is. And then who are the signatures? Because my son created it. He created this entity for the sole purpose of facilitating wholesaling Village Drive to me. That was the sole purpose. He didn't run out and get an EIN number for this LLC. He didn't need to. Okay. Now, notice this, and this is what's dramatically different and what's changed in 20 years since I did the original 21 Days of Real Estate Riches. Nowhere on here does the state anymore ask, what's the purpose of your entity? If you have the older version of the 21 Days of Real Estate Riches, remember how I said buying real estate, selling real estate, and any other purpose, any other valid legal purpose under Maryland law? They don't even ask you anymore, what's the purpose of your LLC? And they don't care. They don't care. So notice this whole articles of organization, the part that goes to the state, the part that the state sees, the state that's part of the public record, it's really simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blanks. 6, fill in the blank, and give us our $154.50. That's it. It's just that straightforward now. I think that's kind of cool. I don't have to run to Preston Street. I don't have to stand in line. I don't have to look for parking. I just go online, fill in the blank, and put in my credit card. And I'm good to go. And depending upon the backlog of work, I'm going to get this in 2 days, 3 days, maybe a week. But I'm good to go. And in this particular case, because this particular LLC, Dave and Neil LLC, was simply used to facilitate wholesaling a deal, it's not his operating company. His operating company is CKS Apparel. That's the name of his quote unquote operating company. This was just set up to facilitate wholesale. We didn't need to go get an EIN number because we were not opening up a bank account for this. Got it? All right, so back to your homework. Your homework is step 1, determine the name of your entity, figure out who's going to serve as your resident agent. If you want it to be Suite 105, go to suite105.com, put in your credit card for $150. You'll get the document, fill out the document, get it to Lisa. If you have better, cheaper options, use them. Just make sure that if you use a relative, that they got a heads up and know that you're going to use them as a resident agent. Because if they get the mail to such and such LLC and they don't recognize it, they're going to put on the outside of the envelope, return to sender. And it's going to go back to the state, and state is going to go, who the heck is this guy who registered an entity, told us this is a resident agent? The resident agent says they don't even know what they're talking about. That's not a good look. But whether you use Suite 105 or a cousin or whatever, just don't use your own name and your home address, okay? Step number 2, go online, check to see availability, register the entity. Just get it done. Get her done, folks. Just get her done. Don't worry about, well, gee, I don't like the name. I'm not sure of the name. Just pick a name, fill it out. If you want to change the name to something else later, change it to something else later. And then after you do that, go on to irs.gov, get yourself your EIN if it is your operating entity. And then I would also strongly recommend go also register the .com. Does anybody have any questions of me on what your homework assignment is? If you do, put it in the chat box. And yes, .com, not .net, not .co, not .us. because every time people think of domain names, they think of .com. And if you if you just say your name to somebody and say, hey, just go to www.shermanragland.com and it's .net, they're going to go to .com. And then you're going to be sending all your business to somebody else. Does it matter whether it's an LLC or S Corp? I'm sorry. How much time did I spend tonight talking about registering S Corps? How much time did I spend tonight talking about LLCs? I love you, D. Thank you. So you don't make me like go on a whole diatribe. Look, if we were going to do business through S Corps, I would have spent an hour on S Corps. But looking at the clock, I just spent an hour talking about I just spent an hour describing a process that should take you 5 minutes. Why did I do that? So that you can come back and watch this video as many times as you need, and you're like, okay, I got it. You know, Sherman covered every single angle. Like, we're going to use LLCs. We're going to, like, S Corps. Well, first of all, a business can't own an S Corp. So if I'm doing all my wheeling and dealing through my LLCs and I want any new deals I come into to be owned by my LLC can't own an S Corp. Only individuals, only US citizens. And I think you're limited to 35. An LLC cannot own an S Corp. So we're not going to be wheeling and dealing through S Corps. We're going to be wheeling and dealing through LLCs, okay? For all the reasons I gave you over the past hour plus, okay? If that's still a question in your mind, do two things. Go into the Facebook group and watch this video again, and meet me tomorrow when we have office hours and ask me any questions that you want, okay? But notice, I only spent 2 minutes talking about S Corps. I spent almost an hour and a half talking about LLCs. That's what we're gonna use. Can I use a UPS address for my business? You know, this is becoming a tricky thing. When I took my son David up to Preston Street 2 years ago to register his CKS apparel, they would not let him use the UPS store for the main address. So we wound up using 16,000 trade zone. So it's kind of becoming a little tricky. Normally, what the rule used to be was you could not use a post office. And the reason why you couldn't use a post office is because the post office doesn't have to accept mail that's sent via UPS or FedEx. But if you send mail, like if the state of Maryland decides to enter into a contract and use FedEx as their main tool for sending out stuff, if they send a letter via FedEx to a post office, the post office will reject it. They won't accept it. So it has historically been the rule you can't use a post office or a PO box for your business address for your entity. But we've never had that problem in the past for UPS stores, because UPS stores did in fact accept service from anybody and everybody, Postal Service, FedEx, UPS, whomever, whatever. But lately we have seen some issues. So I would recommend use Suite 105, and you can also have your mail sent to Suite 105. Again, you just need to give Lisa the heads up. And then later on, see if you can try to change your address to something different and if they'll accept it, okay? Can I change a resident agent on my already formed LLC? Yes, you can, but if you change it, whatever you used before will still be a part of the public record. They never delete the original information. It'll just simply say, you'll fill out a form that says resident agent change, and it'll say resident agent change, but it'll still have the original resident agent. So again, if you're doing that for the specific purpose of getting your name and your address out of the public record, it's not coming out of the public record. The only way to make it come out of the public record is to put that LLC out of business and start over again, okay? But it will always be tied to, I'll always be able to Google it, I'll always be able to see it, okay? All right, any other questions? All right, I think you guys got the hang of this. We do have a case study, and I'd like to show it to you. It's not very long. I know we went a little bit later, way later than I thought we were gonna go. Tomorrow, we're getting together at 7. Tomorrow, there is no homework assignment. Tomorrow, there will be no lecture. It's just open office hours. And I will stay there and answer questions for as long as you guys have questions. But tomorrow, it's just answering questions, going over stuff. It's your guys' chance to catch up for the week. And quite frankly, it's my chance to get a little break in there because I don't have to prepare a lesson plan. But it's a good use of both of our time to go over some stuff I've already gone over, just to make sure that we're all sort of caught up for the first week before we start really, hustling on the second week. Okay. All right. So I do have a case study for you. And I hope you enjoy this. It is related to yesterday's case study, and it's also related to tomorrow's case study. But before we do that, somebody says, any recommendations to find registered agent in DC or Virginia? Yes. Go to the Google machine and type in Virginia. Don't type in VA because you might get Veterans Administration, but type in Virginia resident agent and see what pops up, and then make your own choice. There are lots of companies out there that offer resident agent services, and they're all around the same price, roughly about $100 a year. Some of whom offer additional services like mail forwarding and answering your phone. If you need it, go with them. If you don't need it, just hang with us and we'll take care of you. All right. So here's our case study for today. If you got your AHA sheets ready, it's related to yesterday's case study, and it's also related to tomorrow's case studies. So all three case studies, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, tell a story.
Hello, my name is Dave Allen. I started with Realinvestors probably about a month and a half ago. I recently retired from working with a telecom company for about 30 years and was looking for something to do. Just been pretty much sitting around the house, taking a honey-do list. And, real estate is something I've always wanted to do. I started searching out on the web, trying to find out about how I could get involved in real estate. Ran upon a few YouTube videos. I did that for a little bit, really didn't see any results. And then I ran upon Realinvestors on the meetup website. I went to one of their meetings, great presentation, took the information home, listened to the CD guest. It was very interesting. So I came back a second time, and I think it was Miss Barbara. She was out front. She didn't want to let me in the second time. Fortunately, I was able to convince her to let me in and just listen to the presentation a second time, because I wanted to make sure what I was hearing was accurate. So after the second time, I joined Realinvestors. So as I said, I've only been involved for maybe just a little bit over a year. So while listening to the 21-day program, I was executing on some of the things that Sherman was teaching. I guess it was about a couple of weeks ago, I had gotten in touch with a real estate broker, and was talking with him about some of the properties that I saw. And just through the normal channel of conversation, he mentioned to me, would I be interested in partnering up or getting involved in another deal on Rollins Road. So I told him I was open to take a look at it. The more information I got about it, the more interested I became. I had a more in-depth conversation with Sherman in regards to the deal, because it was his wife that was involved with the deal. And after I got a few more details in regards to the deal, I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to get involved, learn a little bit more about how the deals work, learn a little bit more about the whole process that you have to go through in order to make a deal work. So the portion that I was involved with, I got involved with private money lending. I said I had retired, so I had a retirement account sitting out there, and there was a little bit of extra private funding that was needed in order to make the deal work. So upon talking with him again, getting more details, I decided to get involved with the deal and learn a little bit more about how it works. I am a private lender in this deal, and I believe the deal just recently closed. I believe it was earlier this week, I think maybe Wednesday around noon time was the closing. There had been some issues. It was supposed to close last week, but there were some issues, and had to work through those issues, and it wound up getting closed this past Wednesday. I went over there and visited the property. The property, it's vacant right now. It definitely needs some work. The particular strategy for that particular property, after discussing it with Sherman and Claire, going to rehab the property, and I believe it was going to be a rental property. That's kind of how I got involved with it. That's really something that you know, I aspire to do. You know, rehabbing is one of the things that I like to do. I'm trying to get to that level by where I can do some rehabbing. Additionally, I want to be able to fund my own rehab. I don't want to have to go to a private community. I don't want to have to go to a hard money. You know, I want to build my business to the point where I can do all my rehabs myself. This is a great opportunity for me to get involved in the process and learn a little bit more about it. The return on my investment, we're looking at a 10% return, and we're talking about the length of 6 months with an option to extend out to 12 months. You know, I thought that was a pretty good deal, seeing as I had a lot of my retirement money tied up in the stock market. And with the coronavirus, as everybody knows, the market has been crashed. You know, again, it's about 6 months with the option to you know, I had about 25,000 invested in this deal. Pretty much just had the money sitting in my bank account. Wasn't doing anything. Banks don't pay that much interest. So, you know, this is an opportunity for me to make some money in a deal as well as learn. But the 21-day program itself, I think it's been a great program. It's a program that has a lot of information to help you get started. It's something that takes you step by step. You know, pretty much they lay it straight out what you need to do. You know, that was a great help for me. So, you know, if you tell me what I need to do step by step, I can do that. I get to you know, also call someone. Some of the things that I was looking at on the YouTube when I was first, you know, looking at getting into real estate, you know, you're not affording that. You know, you got somebody out there on YouTube who just, you know, gives you instructions on what to do. You know, you can't contact them. You have nobody to bounce ideas off of. So the 21-day program's not like that. I really get an opportunity to speak with someone and to, you know, help to give me that course directions and tell me when I'm getting a little bit off base or doing something that I probably shouldn't be doing. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm new. You know, I'm excited about Real Investors. It's been a blessing to me. Helped me learn a lot more about real estate, a lot more about investing. I'm continuing to work with Jesse Marks, my broker, to identify properties that are potential candidates for investing. Quick and in a nutshell, that's kind of how everything came together. My name is David Allen. I'm from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. I'm going to make a 10% return on my investment dealing with a property on Rollins Avenue, Capitol Heights, Maryland. I'm a real investor and I get real checks.
Okay, guys, in the chat box, tell me on a scale of 1 to 5, how we do today. We do all right? I know we went a little longer than we normally go, but I hope you guys got the information you need to get out there and form those entities. So that's your homework assignment for today. One more time, go out there, get online, form those Maryland entities. And if you get stuck and you need a little help, we'll be having open office hours tomorrow. I do not have a lecture planned. I do not have slides planned. It's just a chance for us to get caught up, okay? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you guys very much. And we'll see you guys tomorrow for open office hours. Have a good night.